Hey guys and welcome back to my channel. This is part 1 of What If Madara Was in That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and also go and support the author, link in description. The battlefield was quiet now. Where once the sky had been split open by titanic forces, where chakra had surged like oceans in a storm, where gods clashed atop the bones of nations, there was now only silence. Dust drifted in the air like the ashes of an era. Madara Uchiha lay motionless on the cracked earth, his body riddled with deep wounds, his Rinnegan dim and lifeless. He could no longer feel the earth beneath him, only the void pulling at the edges of his mind. And yet, even in his final moments, there was a strange peace. A fleeting, bitter kind of peace. Standing above him was Hashirama Senju, the man he had once called friend, enemy, and everything in between. The first Hokage looked down at Madara not with triumph, but with sorrow. His face was drawn, not with hatred, but a kind of mourning. You were never the monster they believed you to be, Hashirama thought softly to himself. He knelt down beside Madara, resting a weathered hand on his old friend's chest. Madara coughed, blood painting his lips. Is that you, Hashirama? Hashirama gave a weak smile, then replied. Yes, Madara. Brief moments pass before either tries to speak again, though eventually Madara is able to muster the last of his quickly fading strength to turn his head and try to lock eyes with Hashirama, albeit he looks like little more than a blur. I guess that, neither you or I were able to achieve what I truly wanted, our dream. Hashirama listened intently to his old friend before responding. It's never that easy. Our job is merely to do all that we can do while we are alive, then bequeath the rest of it for future generations to accomplish. Madara gives another faint smile after hearing Hashirama's optimism. He had always been able to appreciate the attitude Hashirama had, even if he couldn't walk that same path with Hashirama. Life was simply too unforgiving for Madara to uphold that optimism as he had aged into the man he would become. Madara shifting his gaze back to the sky then weakly began talking again. You are so naive, just as you usually are, hey. You have always been the optimist. Although perhaps that is the proper way to be. The dream that I had has been crushed, burned, and had its ashes scattered by the wind. However, your dream is still relevant now and continues to live on. Hashirama, we were both too hasty, we didn't need to reach our dreams ourselves. It was far more important to cultivate those who would come after us, to whom we could entrust our dreams to. Madara, which means I would have failed anyways, after all I have always hated having someone standing behind me. Hashirama gave a chuckle, then saying, you were always slightly pessimistic. Although perhaps you would have failed. But I still believe, somewhere in all of this, your dream was never wrong. Just the path, for after all him and Madara shared the same dream and built a village together. Even if Madara didn't see it as their dream, Hashirama would never view it as only his dream. Madara turned his head slightly. Their eyes met, dull red and sage-sunken brown. Madara, do you remember what you told me when we were still children? You once said to me that we are both shinobi. We never know when we might die, and you also told me for neither side to die we would have to reveal what's inside of themselves, hiding nothing, and to drink together as if they were brothers, but the both of us are about to die so right now, so we have a chance to drink together as war buddies. Madara started to reply with a yes but ran out of time before finishing his answer. Hashirama's only answer to his question ended up being a slow closing of his eyes with a rare genuine smile from his old friend. Hagoromo would then float away from Team 7, releasing the remaining Edo Tensei. While the battlefield is being lit up by the receding Edo Tensei, he approached the fallen ghost of the Uchiha, lowering his staff to Madara before his corpse is enveloped in white and teleported elsewhere. The rest of the events in the Naruto world from this place on go as it did in the manga canon. Time passed, or perhaps it didn't. Darkness embraced everything. There was no ground, no sky, no sound. Just a still, infinite nothing. Until a spark flared. A presence. Warm, old, and filled with cosmic weight. Madara's eyes snapped open. He was floating not physically, not spiritually, but in a realm beyond such limits. Before him stood Hagoromo Otsutsuki, the sage of 6 paths, robes flowing like stardust through the void, with 2 young men in similar garb flanking his left and right. Madara did not speak first. He only observed. He had never seen a painting or heard of an accurate description of the man before him, but the matching Rinnegan eyes burrowing into his own told him all he needed to know. This was the Sage of Six Paths. Hagoromo eventually broke the silence. The tides of destiny churn endlessly. Madara Uchiha, all waves eventually return to the shore. Madara frowned slightly. If you're here, I'm either dead or worse. Both. Neither. Something in between. Hagoromo folded his arms. Your actions sent tremors through time itself. But intent. Intent is harder to weigh. So I figured that I should assess your merit myself. The sage began pacing slowly through the nothingness, his steps sending ripples through the empty plain. You sought peace. You sacrificed much. But peace born through domination, even illusion, is not peace at all. You should know that, yet you became so sold on this idea that it warped your worldview. I know Zetsu manipulated you, but I want to know in your own words, how did you fall? You once built a village together, protect children, but in the face of your despair you opted to wield the child Obito as a weapon. Madara narrowed his eyes. I wanted to end the cycle. I was tired of watching everything burn. So were many before you, Hagoromo said gently. And many after. But your solution robbed people of choice and all free will. Silence hung thick for several moments. I have a riddle for you, Madara. One I've asked many before, yet few ever understood. Nobody ever asks to be brought into such a cruel reality. People often attach themselves to one light that anchors them, but when that light is lost in the face of adversity and you begin to stumble in the darkness, what should you do? You are being pulled into an abyss without your light. Is there any recourse? Madara narrowed his eyes. You know my answer. I know your truth. But I wonder if you've grown enough to see beyond it. The sage's voice took on a heavier tone, his ancient chakra pressing gently on Madara's soul, not to crush, but to stir. You were deceived, yes. But not all your mistakes were born from Zetsu's lies. You clung to pain. You refused the hand offered to you by Hashirama all those years ago. Madara looked down. He didn't deny it. If Izuna lived, perhaps I would have been different. Originally I relied on him to be my light, and he was what kept me from breaking under the weight of the world. I hated, I despaired, so to avenge my fallen brother I relied on my pain. It fueled my Sharingan and pushed me to heights I couldn't even fathom as a child. Being in that position made me realize it still wasn't enough power to change things around me to my liking. So out of desperation and old sentiment I took Hashirama's hand to build a village. I knew it could never truly fill the void, but I tried to use the village as a second light. It only saw me as a great shadow that would extinguish the light of the entire village. I know the answer you want would be for that person to find a new light. A reason to press forward, but it could be said that the infinite Tsukuyomi became my reason to press forward through a world I began to view as a hell that needed to be changed. Perhaps, Hagoromo echoed. But pain cannot be the soul mold of identity, and power cannot be the filling. Look deeper, Madara, beyond the infinite Tsukuyomi. What did you want? I know you wanted peace, but what did you truly want in life beyond that? Madara's gaze lifted slowly. I wanted my family to live, but as we all know, things never go according to plan in life. All I ever wanted was to protect my loved ones, but I could never do it. My power was always false when it mattered most. It's ironic that I didn't come into true power until I had lost all things worth protecting. My goal then shifted to keep others from going through what I did, but as I can see now, even that wasn't the correct dream. So honestly, Sage, I don't know what I want at this point. Hagoromo, I can understand why you're struggling for an answer, but that's fine. You can answer at a later time, but for now I have a new question. If you were forced to walk through life once more, what would you do? Would you still try to change the world? Or maybe live a peaceful life in the mountains? Perhaps even conquer? Madara kept his expression blank, but internally he felt a bit of excitement. Yet at the same time doesn't get his hopes up, knowing his time has passed and also wanting to finally reunite with the Uchiha in the Pure Lands now that he is dead. Or at least the Uchiha he still liked, which boiled down to his parents and his 4 brothers. Madara, finally done with this small introspection, calmly responds, if you're asking if I would take it upon myself to try to save the world again, absolutely not. I would simply find a nice place to build a house and enjoy the simplicities of life that I missed out on waiting 70-odd years in a cave. At most I would just keep myself entertained. Though if something else threatens the world it would only be natural for me to respond in kind by annihilating a threat like that. The sage smiled faintly. That answer is enough. For now. He raised his hand, and space itself seemed to bend. The infinite black shattering giving way to a bright yellow light radiant like a star. Then awaken, Madara Uchiha, reincarnation of my son Indra. I gift you a new land, you will walk amongst the living land untouched by chakra as far removed from your old world. Though this gift I speak of comes with strings. You must be rejoined with the dormant, sealed and weakened Gedo statue along with the stump of the god tree left over from your battle with Naruto. This must be so that Kagaya may never rise again. After much strife she is the last remaining Otsutsuki due to her immortality. So if her seal were to ever be undone in Thisage nobody in this new peacetime would be able to stop her. Madara opened his mouth to respond but before he could let out his voice the light surrounding them intensified to a blinding degree swallowing the entire dimension whole. He awoke in a cave. The air was thick with otherworldly presence. The walls glowed faintly, as if the cave itself took a sharp inhale as he suddenly came to and snap up to a sitting position. Then the memories flooded him. Battles. Betrayals. Beyond all of it. The reason. He placed a hand on over the left side of his face slightly gripping his head. No more shortcuts, he whispered. No more illusions. This time, I simply live my life. A tremor passed through the cave. It did not stir violently but responded with a low, slow pulse of dormant power, like a sleeping god acknowledging a familiar presence. He spent hours exploring the cave, understanding its geography. There were energy pockets, veins of dormant unidentified energy and strange crystals growing from the walls, no doubt sources of local power. This world didn't have chakra, but it wasn't empty of power either. In time, the monsters came. Grotesque creatures, half-formed and drooling, spawned from the depths of the cave. Dozens, then hundreds. Some were small and feral. Others were towering beasts stitched from shadow and malice. Madara watched their arrival not with fear but with anticipation, glee even. He activated his Sharingan, then the world slowed. He moved like wind through a wheat field. No wasted movement. Every beast that charged met fist, boot or flame each with crushing force. Sometimes blood would splatter on the walls or body parts would go sliding across the ground. Each strike was a vow. Each kill, a cleansing. They burned, they bled, they shattered and yet still they came almost without end. Madara stood tall among the remaining monsters, his body steaming with exertion but unbowed. Each second that passed meant at least 10 souls had been reaped. Only sickening crunching and weak death mules could be heard. This world had given him let a devilish smirk grace his lips for he had a decently fun time getting to move his bones after so long. He closed his eyes. A new world where monsters roam freely in the wild, at least I won't ever have to look too far when my blood boils and demands a dance. The last of the grotesque creatures collapsed beneath the force of Madara Uchiha's boot, its body crumpling unnaturally as blood sprayed across the stone floor. The cave was thick with the stench of rotten damp stone. Madara exhaled slowly, scanning the ruined battlefield. Severed limbs, crushed torsos, and twitching corpses lay strewn in every direction, casualties of brutal, clinical taijutsu. He hadn't even drawn a weapon. He hadn't needed to. His bare chest rose and fell in steady rhythm, the only sound in the stillness aside from the occasional drip of water echoing from deep within the caverns. Each breath was deep, methodical, practiced, an echo of years spent mastering the art of war. Strange, he thought, rotating his shoulder slightly. Even with just the base Sharingan activated, my power feels far beyond what it should be. Even approaching the level 1 reached when fighting might guy. Madara narrowed his eyes, inspecting his own arm. His muscles were more refined, his chakra more refined still. After being rejoined with the remnants of the god tree and the Gedo statue, he expected some enhancement. But not this. He felt stronger, sharper, denser. As though the very fabric of his chakra had thickened. The fractions I reclaimed shouldn't amount to this much. He crouched beside a fallen creature, curious. None of these beasts had chakra. And yet, they cast abilities, resembling jutsu. There's something else here, he mused. Energy without chakra. Perhaps this is what the sage hinted at. Another source, one that fuels this world differently. Before he could delve deeper into thought, a strange sensation tensed the hair on the back of his neck. Heat. Pale greenish-blue fire erupted all around him, snapping upward like claws, encircling him in a blazing cage. His instincts screamed. He spun, scanning for a source, but there was no chakra signature, no trace of nature energy. Just something foreign. More flames suddenly burst forward towards the flame dome. They converged into a wide stream that barreled toward his face with no escape. Instinct overrode analysis. He activated the Rinnegan and stretched out his palm, only remembering when it was too late that this isn't chakra. Preta path. The torrent collided with his hand. Madara flinched. The sensation was foreign. He expected pain. He expected nothingness, but instead, the flame was absorbed. The sensation was alien. It didn't fuel his reserves, it changed them. His chakra thickened, like molten iron instead of flowing water. He could feel it coiling deeper, intertwining with his core. This wasn't chakra. It wasn't natural energy either. And yet, somehow, it flowed into him. Not as fuel, but as a conversion. His chakra became heavier. More potent. It was like molten essence pouring into his veins, powerful, unpredictable, and yet strangely harmonious and no less responsive. For 30 seconds, the fire raged. When it ended, Madara stood untouched, hand still extended. He frowned. A tall, red-skinned humanoid stepped out from the shadows. Towering nearly 8 feet tall. Muscular, with twisted horns and long tusks. He wore cultist robes, black and crimson, etched with runes, and carried a massive blade across his back that hummed with arcane venom. Incredible. I never thought a human could block my attack. My name is Xantrax, the figure said, voice oily with pride. And you stand in the sacred place where my cult will soon resurrect Veldora, the storm dragon. Rejoice, human. You may kneel before me. Madara didn't speak. Xantrax grinned wider, his tusks glinting. There are only 3 paths. You join the cult willingly. You are enthralled by one of our mages. Or you are slaughtered like livestock. Choose wisely. Madara's brow twitched. Mage. That word mage caught Madara's attention. In his world, mages were fairy tales told to infants. He had barely remembered the bedtime whispers from his long-dead mother. And yet, this man claimed magic as casually as chakra. Xantrax inhaled sharply, savoring the air. You smell strange, human, and yet, not. You'd make a fine general, perhaps. Think of it. Pillaging cities, gathering souls for spell rites, ushering in the dawn of our master's kingdom. Our glorious master, the peerless Lord Negros, the eternal Maw of Chaos, has given us purpose. We are but ants under his mighty boot, and yet, he lifts us, exalting our flesh and our souls. With each spell ritual, each sacrifice, we draw closer to the new dawn. Xantrax is but one of 11 chosen 11. And when the kingdom of dread rises, we, the faithful, shall be its nobles. Immortal, unchained. Free to indulge. Free to rule. Free to feast on the filth of this world. He gestured grandly. The pleasures we offer our faithful are legendary. Even the flesh of royalty is not beyond reach. You will dine, conquer, and revel in what others dare not dream. Madara raised a single hand. Enough. You and this cult are absolutely revolting. I would be doing the world a favor by wiping you out here and now. Then Madara suddenly vanished, instantly reappearing inches from Xantrax, forcing the cultist to teleport away in a puff of shadow. The battle exploded into motion. Xantrax unleashed green fireballs, necrotic blasts, and teleporting feints. Madara weaved through them, testing. Studying. Shadows blinked across the chamber, clashing light against abyss. After several exchanges, Madara noticed something. The teleportation range wasn't that vast. While it's still annoying, it had limitations. He couldn't teleport far. So this time when a Xantrax appeared, Madara launched a fireball at him and immediately began looking around for any sign of appearance. He saw a flicker of strange energy beginning to gather a few meters away from his previous attack and was preparing to blitz to his opponent before halting when he realized his massive fireball was causing a slight cave-in. When Xantrax materialized, he had a fraction of a second to teleport again, but his teleportation range was just short of clearing the zone that was collapsing. Xantrax, with his left arm crushed but not destroyed beyond repair, snarls at our protagonist, lowly human filth, before using his remaining good hand to spawn shadow balls that floated in the air, blasting Madara independently of Xantrax while he continued his method of teleporting and blasting Madara with green flames. Gradually, Madara began timing his strikes. reading the subtle energy flares Xantrax emitted before vanishing. His Sharingan sharper than ever revealed every twitch. Every flinch. My perception has improved beyond the M's, Madara realized. This isn't the Mangekyo. My base Sharingan has evolved. He pondered. Was it an extra gift from the sage? Madara doubted it. The god tree. The ghetto statue. Or perhaps my own rebirth awakened something deeper. Mid-reflection Madara used wood style to create a wooden spear and launched it at Xantrax, but when he teleported as expected Madara's Sharingan violently whirls as for the first time with absolute clarity he can see Xantrax before he reformed. Seeing this opportunity he propels himself forward feet first for a bone-crushing drop kick. With perfect precision, Madara's attack landed true just as Xantrax reappeared. The blow connected squarely between the legs in his crown jewels and they echoed a gruesome cracking sound upon impact. The cultist screamed a high-pitched squeal as he was launched 30 feet into a cavern wall, crashing through it into another chamber. Madara began slowly walking over to his fanatic opponent but did wish he had kicked a little higher. He thinks a dishonorable tactic such as that is far beneath him, but this was an accident. Didn't bother taking height into consideration when he initially launched at him, seeing his opportunity. Xantrax, coughing blood, and rolling in place shattered and broken, quickly pulled out a glowing red amulet when he saw Madara slowly approaching. You, he wheezed, only beat the weakest. I am the newest general. But mark me, somebody else from the higher ups will comes in my stead, and when they do, they will rend your flesh from your soul. He vanished. Madara grunted. Unsightly. He turned back into the shadows of the cave. Soon, he saw his reflection in a blood puddle. His face. Familiar yet not the same one he knew. He looked younger. Less burdened even. If he had to put an age to it he would say he was back to being 18 again, but for some reason his eye bags, albeit mildly less pronounced, are still present despite not forming as permanent features on his face until his mid-20s after Izuna had died. This youthful body restored, but the power remained. His eyes then trailed downward to his chest, and to his relief nothing was there. Hashirama's face had once been embedded in his chest, now it was gone. Not even a scar. But the power. The wood style. Still there, stronger than when he was an Edo because of the god tree now empowering his wood style even further. He narrowed his eyes. Interesting. He sensed a new power source. Vast. Ancient. Though it is not chakra, which made Madara wonder why he is beginning to attune more and more to this world's energy. First he was able to pinpoint Xantrax, and now he is sensing a chakra signature. No, a magic signature if this world is really filled with mages in place of shinobi. Is this because he absorbed that cult freak's fireball with strange energy? Madara cuts off his own musings in favor of following the source. Madara continued deeper into the cave, following the faint pull of something immense and ancient. The air grew heavier with each step, charged with a power he could not yet name. His Sharingan picked up faint vibrations in the mana field, though he still had no formal understanding of magicules. But whatever lay ahead, it pulsed with intensity, calm, yet overwhelming. He came to a chamber unlike any other. The space was cavernous, vast enough to house a small village. In the center stood an immense crystalline prison, brilliant yet ominous. Inside, sealed in perfect suspension, was a massive dragon coiled in slumber, wings pressed against its sides closed but twitching faintly. Then the dragon stirred. With a sound like cracking stone and rushing wind, two golden eyes snapped open, glowing with raw sentience. Madara's presence had not gone unnoticed, it seems. Ho! The dragon rumbled, voice reverberating off the stone walls and through Madara's chest like thunder. Another human dares approach. Come to gawk. Or to die. Madara crossed his arms, unfazed. You're not what I expected. I've fought many things in my time. Dragons were fairy tales in my world, or mere constructions of chakra like a water dragon. You, however, are very real. The dragon's head tilted slightly, smoke curling from its nostrils. HMPH. Bold. Most tremble. Few speak. Madara stepped closer, eyes glinting. You have power. I can feel it. But you're sealed here. Imprisoned. Madara's mind was racing because what he was sensing from this sealed dragon was easily comparable to the full 10 tails and could have deeper depths still. You're sharp, the dragon mused, tail twitching. I am Beldora Tempest. A storm dragon, sealed here centuries ago by a foolish hero wielding ancient magic. She panicked during our duel, and used her trump card to trap me here. And you've remained sealed ever since. Veldora's growl deepened. Trapped. For over 300 years. Alone. Bored beyond reason. I've counted every crack in this damn cave. Madara's expression remained unreadable as he let Veldora finish his story. Heard the reasoning for him being sealed. Why should I care, Storm Dragon? To me it seems as if your own lack of control landed you in this situation. Because, Veldora's tone shifted, you are not ordinary. My instincts scream that you are more than human. You walk like a man, but your presence is divine. No, perhaps embryonic divinity. Suppressed, still forming but there. Madara quirked a brow. Interesting. You sense that? I do. The moment you stepped near, the magicule shifted. Warped. Even the barrier twisted in recognition. A pause stretched between them. Veldora's voice softened slightly. I can't break this seal. But you might. Or, at the very least, you will one day. If you release me, I will swear an eternal alliance. Stand by your side as a powerful partner. Fight for you. Burn your enemies to ash. All I ask for is freedom. Madara studied him carefully. A reckless dragon needs guidance. Structure. That's what got you sealed in the first place. Veldora laughed a deep, bellowing roar. Guidance. Ha. Perhaps. Perhaps I need a leash after all. And if I refuse? Then you leave me here, and this conversation dies in obscurity. You gain nothing and I continue to rot here. Madara considered the proposition in silence. Finally, he raised his hand, Rinnegan flaring. He approached the barrier. As his hand neared, the very air distorted. Waves of visible heat shimmered around his palm. The barrier pulsed resisting, yet it was almost as if the magicules that comprised the barrier wanted to obey Madara's will but still fought back valiantly to hold strong. He pushed, chakra pressing against the crystalline barrier, causing a massive sparking light to form between his palm and the barrier, shaking everything near and around the cave, but the seal held strong. As he dropped his hand, he looked at the dragon with no readable expression outside of maybe slight annoyance. This is not a barrier that I can so casually shat. Then Madara felt a strong pull in his mind. Suddenly, his consciousness was pulled inward as if summoned. The plane of his inner world unfolded before him, awe-inspiring in its vastness and surreal beauty. The black sky above stretched endlessly, speckled with colossal stars of red and blue light, slowly rotating like cosmic dancers. A massive full moon hung overhead, slightly darker than a normal moon, casting long, eerie reflections onto the shallow ankle-deep waters below. The water itself was an obsidian mirror, calm and glassy, disturbed only by the occasional ripple from his own movement. Despite its darkness, it reflected everything with impossible clarity. In the distance, a solitary structure, an ornate villa of dark stone and glowing accents, stood proudly upon the watery floor, impossibly supported, almost as if supported by the heavens. So, I've already screwed up, and it's only been a few hours. A chuckle answered him. From the far side of the mindscape, Hagoromo Otsutsuki approached, his glowing staff in hand, robes flowing behind him like mist. No, the sage replied, smiling. Though we've been here the entire time. Watching. Waiting. Asura and Indra emerged from the villa, walking slowly over the water. Indra was regal, reserved, yet powerful, his long hair swaying, eyes nearly a mirror of Madara's own. Asura's presence was warm and calm, though a quiet fire burned within him. Madara folded his arms. I thought you were. They spoke. Hagoromo's voice echoed, his tone calm and wise. It's been 60 years since your last breath, Madara. Time flows differently beyond death. Naruto and Sasuke have fulfilled their fate, finally breaking one of the cycles that burdened the world and you alike. However, they immediately began facing other Otsutsuki threats. They fought valiantly along with the next generation to end that threat permanently. Though not without sacrifice. Naruto and Sasuke lived long lives but died protecting everyone one last time to give their children a shot at victory. They died at the ripe age of 75. Exactly 2 years after their passing, I came to you for our talk. Doing this, as I explained earlier, takes the only Otsutsuki that could revive out of the equation. However, with my son's reincarnation cycle ending, we had nothing left to tether myself to the world like I had done for eons. I thought after I used my remaining power to breath life back into you that I would fade away forever. But now my 2 sons and I have been tethered to you. Hagoromo nodded. We have passed on. But you are more than a man now, Madara. What you've become. has drawn us here. You are no longer just the inheritor of Indra's will. You carry fragments of our souls, and those remnants live on inside you. Not as voices, but as pieces of a greater whole. Madara took this new information in stride. That's unexpected, but I know you didn't pull me in here just to tell me this. Madara turned toward Indra. I am busy so trying to free an overgrown lizard if you guys don't mind, so why was I brought here? Indra nodded. You tried to free the dragon. You failed. Madara frowned. Briefly, I still have options. It is not because you are weak, Hagoromo interjected. But because the laws of this world are foreign. You do not yet fully understand the energies that govern it. Indra crossed his arms. There's another way. Use Kamui. Madara raised a brow. That was Obito's ability. Not mine. Indra's mouth curled slightly. It is now. Or rather, it has been since the moment we merged with you. You've felt it, your eyes have evolved. Your body be changed. Even your perception of space and time has begun to change. Madara remained silent, thoughtful. Asura stepped forward. Think of it as a spiritual convergence. Not just the fusion of Hashirama's cells and your own Sharingan. This is deeper. Your rebirth allowed all our energies to join within you. Even the last traces of grandmother's legacy, however faint, has been inherited. But more than that, Indra has directly overlaid his own spiritual eye onto yours. Madara tilted his head. Meaning? Hagoromo raised his staff. You've inherited not just power, but possibility. The eyes you wield now are more than Sharingan or Rinnegan, they are the evolution of everything our family has been. Indra lifted a hand, a Sharingan forming in his palm as if to illustrate his point. I was born with multiple Mangekyo Sharingan abilities, 4 to be exact: Kamui, Amaterasu, Tsukuyomi, and Kagutsuchi. For centuries, I thought I alone held them all, until time revealed others with different gifts. Shisui, Shin, you and your brother Izuna. Even Sasuke's daughter, Sarada, have original powers outside of my scope. He pointed toward Madara's eyes. He stepped closer to Madara. Now, through this merge, you inherit them too. Your base Sharingan has been elevated beyond its limits. It now sees at a level rivaling the eternal Mangekyo in clarity, if not surpassing it. Your Mangekyo itself has become something entirely new, although the design remained the same. And your Rinnegan, he stopped. Hagoromo completed the thought. Your Rinnegan is now something more than mine ever was. You've already felt it, haven't you? The pressure it exerts. The way the very air bends around you. Madara gave a slow nod. I thought I was imagining it. Even without chakra, the world reacts to it. Like a living force. Because it is, Hagoromo said. Your eyes no longer simply perceive reality. They influence it. Your place could tumble nations, but be warned. The power will only grow. And it will tempt you. Asura stepped up beside his brother. Which is why we're here. To remind you this is your fourth life. Izuna. Hashirama. Obito. So many chances, Madara. This time, it must be different. Madara looked upward, eyes reflecting the stars. So what do I call this evolution? Indra smiled faintly. That is for history to decide. For now, use Kamui. Free your dragon. Claim your path. Madara fell silent. Then nodded once. And the Gedo and the God Tree, where are they? This is my mindscape, so I expected the Gedo statue would be rooted into the ground somewhere nearby. Hagoromo answered. Fused to you. Not as a host. But as part of your being. Kagaya cannot be reborn from them. The keys to her revival are essentially destroyed this way. A stronger warrior can't just come rip the needed parts from you. The stars overhead swirled slowly in spirals. The blue and red orbs drifted across the dark canvas like celestial eyes. Then the sky slowly began to dissolve as Madara felt himself being drawn back to his body. The stars rotated slower now, as if saluting him. The moon faded into an afterimage. Hagoromo raised one hand in farewell. Remember, Madara, he said. Divinity is not born. It is forged. With that, Madara's consciousness returned. Back in the real world, his eyes opened, eternal Mangekyo Sharingan aglow. Wordlessly a rip in space began to form. A swirling vortex of spatial distortion slowly opened directly in front of Veldora's crystalline prison, like a tear in reality itself. The very air shuddered, rippling with unstable pressure. Veldora's eyes widened as the swirling black and purple void expanded rapidly. What is that? Veldora roared, wings instinctively flaring within the crystal. You dare trap me again. I will not be sealed another century. Calm yourself, Madara said coolly, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. This is not a prison. It's a pocket dimension I control created by a power known as Kamui. I am moving you somewhere safe, temporarily. Veldora's wild flailing halted mid-motion. The mana storm crackling around the crystal began to settle, and he stared at Madara through narrowed, cautious eyes. You're not lying. No, Madara replied. This is merely a transfer. I cannot break the seal with what I possess right now, but in there, you will be free from this prison's influence. No one will disturb you. The vortex intensified, pulling Veldora in as the last tendrils of his aura unraveled from the sealed crystal. His form shimmered, then warped, and in a final flash of light, vanished entirely into the Kamui realm. Silence followed before Madara lowered his hand. Another ally, he said quietly. Another piece on the board. Madara turned from the now empty chamber. The crystalline remnants of the barrier shimmered faintly, like the last breath of a dying star. With Veldora now safely within the Kamui dimension, there was no more reason to remain. His path turned toward the exit. As he moved through the winding tunnels of the cave, the ambient energy grew sharper. Twisted, corrupted magic lingered in the air like oil over water. Then voices. Madara paused, listening. Ahead, just around the bend near the cavern's mouth, was chaos. Near the mouth of the cave, he finally saw them. Over 40 cultists. Weak. Stepped into the light slowly, not caring to hide his presence or move quietly. As he approached, Madara overheard someone yelling, "He'll return. He's probably just taking a shit or something." No, he's not, Madara said flatly, eyes cold. He left you all to die, so unless you want that to happen, stop blocking the cavern exit. Madara strode forward slowly, eyes calm, footsteps echoing like drums of war, but the cultist only seems to prepare magical attacks and swords. Are you fools really not going to move? I hope you all dance better than that pretentious red giant then. The next sound was cultist screaming incantations. A barrage of green flames, corrupted lightning, and summoned bone spears surged toward him. Madara's figure blurred. A twist, a step, and he was no longer there. The attacks crashed into the walls, vaporizing stone. He reappeared amidst them like a specter, grabbing one cultist by the throat and hurling him into 3 others. Another cultist raised a staff. Madara shattered it with a punch that sent the man tumbling 10 meters. A particularly bold one charged Madara with a war cry. He was promptly disarmed, flipped, and used as a bludgeon to knock out 2 more. Spellcasters tried to maintain formation, casting in sync. One shouted, "By the holy name of R." He was silenced by a swift kick to the jaw that launched him airborne before his sentence finished. Madara's movements were fluid, almost lazy, yet devastatingly precise. Every flick of his wrist, every spin or step, ended in a broken limb or a shattered will. His Sharingan tracked every movement. No spell landed. No attack broke his skin. The cultists began to turn on each other. He's too fast. So then just kill him before he moves, damn it. One screamed, grabbing a companion and throwing them toward Madara. The poor soul flailed midair as Madara sidestepped and clotheslined him, continuing his advance. I'm not dying here. A woman yelled. Not like this. Before throwing her robes off and fleeing the scene, Madara swept through the crowd like a reaper a field of wheat. Screams echoed as bodies flew in every direction. Cracked ribs, broken knees, unconscious groans. One man tripped over his own comrade's body, scrambled backward, and fell again, weeping. In the center of the chaos, a cultist dropped his staff and shouted, "Mercy. I'm just an initiate. I was just here for the robes." Madara stopped just long enough to stare. He was promptly backhanded into a boulder, albeit the stubborn cultist clung to life still. Another swung a club, only for Madara to catch it midair and use him as a human flail against 3 others. Retreat. One screamed. Run. But there was nowhere to run. Madara's Sharingan tracked every movement. Spells fizzled against his skin. Blades shattered. Some begged. Others cried. One tripped over a body and sobbed uncontrollably. One zealot dropped to his knees and sobbed, "Forgive me, Lord Xantrax. Forgive me, Mother. I should have joined the temple choir instead." Madara snorted. "Perhaps you'd have hit the right notes." He blurred forward and sent the man flying with a casual slap, sending his body tumbling like a tossed scarecrow but not killing him like the most of the others. Soon, all that remained were 7 trembling survivors pressed against the cavern wall, shaking uncontrollably. Go. Tell your master. Capturing Beldora is off the table because I, Madara Uchiha, now have him as a sworn ally, and I won't let some lowly cultist take someone in allegiance to me. The survivors fled, tears and snot streaming, with the one picking up his 2 unconscious friends taking the longest. After some time, Madara sensed they had moved far enough away to be untraceable through his current magic sensing capabilities. Madara stepped out of the cave. The sun bathed him in gold as endless greenery and life now flooded his sight. A new world. A new war on a cult. A peaceful life in a cabin far removed from people. He had many options to consider as the weight of living for the 4th time truly dawned on him at the beautiful yet familiar sight of a forest. And he smiled as a single leaf gently floated down before landing before him at the very edge where the stone cave entrance met the grass of the forest. Hagoromo's words to him to live how he wanted reverberated in his head as he said to himself, "Very well, I will live this life the way I truly want," as he takes his first steps into the world. Leaving the cavern. Madara stood at the cave's mouth, the wind brushing through his raven black hair as he surveyed the Jura forest. It had been 4 days since his battle against the cultist General Xantrax and the encounter with the sealed storm dragon, Beldora. In that time, the world had shifted around him in subtle but important ways. With wood style, Madara had built a crude but sturdy house near the cave entrance, just enough for shelter. He laid in it each night, though he only slept once. The other nights were filled with meditation, reflection, and observation. Monsters had grown more aggressive in Beldora's absence, emboldened by the vacuum of power. Some dared to challenge him. They died. When magic-wielding creatures launched attacks at him, Madara calmly absorbed their energy through the Preta path, experimenting with how this strange world's magic fused with chakra. Their spells added to his reserves, but more than that, they changed them. Magicals and chakra were knitting together, slowly transforming his body and his connection to energy itself. On the 5th day, as Madara cooked freshly caught fish over an open flame near his home, a small group of goblins cautiously approached. Their bodies were thin, malnourished, their eyes hollow with desperation. One among them stepped forward, youthful and steady despite the fear on his face. "We seek your strength," he said, bowing. "The dire wolves attacked us recently, they will return. Our village will not survive another assault." Madara didn't respond immediately. He stared at them, gaze calculating. "You speak of wolves. What's your purpose in this forest? What species dominate it? Are humans present?" The goblins exchanged nervous glances. We don't know much," the leader said. "The forest has always been ruled by Beldora's shadow. Monsters rarely strayed near his cave. With his disappearance, everything changed." "Interesting," Madara said, his Sharingan active, glinting in the firelight. "You are aware of what was sealed here?" "Yes. But we didn't dare approach the cave until now." Madara stood, dusting off his pants. "Very well. I'll observe. Take me to this village." The goblin party led Madara toward their village outskirts, where the smell of blood still lingered faintly. A single dire wolf lay slain, its body slashed open and swarming with flies. Just as they neared the clearing, a deep growl rolled through the trees. A dozen dire wolves emerged, led by a massive one with a jagged scar down its eye and a mane that bristled like black thunderclouds. The alpha snarled, stepping forward with disdain. "You brought a human to die for you. Weaklings." Madara's Sharingan spun lazily into view. "I am not here for them. I came to see if you're worth my time." The alpha bared his fangs. "Then prepare to be devoured, ape." In a single step, the beast lunged, fangs bared, claws raised. Madara vanished and reappeared above him, foot already descending. He struck the wolf on the back of the head, slamming him into the ground with such force that it cracked the earth beneath. Bones shattered. The wolf coughed blood but still rose, growling with trembling defiance. "Submit or die, wolf. You're not worthy of dancing with me." The wolf hesitated, then, pride swelling, lunged again with a desperate growl. Madara, annoyed, reached and snatched a sword from one of the nearby goblins, spinning and impaling the alpha through the chest. The beast froze mid-motion, eyes wide. "I told you to leave. Madara withdrew the blade and let the body fall. The dire wolves bowed. Their instincts, honed over generations, recognized the vast difference in power. In the hours that followed, Madara learned the goblin's chief was nameless, and his son Rigir was a promising warrior. Ranga, the wolf pup who would later prove significant, remained silent but watchful. When Madara learned that only Rigir had a name, he frowned. Naming is rare among monsters, Rigir explained. And few receive such honor. We're all simply goblin until a leader grants it. Madara, unfamiliar with the custom but irritated by the logistical inefficiency, declared, then I'll name you all. How can I give commands without knowing who I'm speaking to? He started with Rigir's younger brother, Rigird. Then came a wave, Gobta, Gobchi, Gobnaga, the process continued steadily. As each name was spoken, the monsters would glow faintly, their bodies beginning to change, evolve. Ranga, upon being named, howled in ecstasy as his body surged with power. His fur darkened, his form enlarged. Horns began to protrude. Madara, slightly frowning, continued. His chakra, now intertwined with magicules, began to drain at an alarming rate. He didn't understand why they reacted so strongly to being named, but he couldn't stop. Finally, after the last of the goblins and wolves were named, including the extra 100 or so that had survived due to Madara's early intervention, he swayed. His vision blurred. His body stumbled. Rigir, Ranga. He collapsed before finishing the thought. Silence fell. Lord Madara. Gobta rushed forward. Rigir caught him, eyes wide with panic. He passed out. The named monsters formed a protective circle, hearts pounding with the instinctual knowledge. Their master had protected them. Now it was their turn. The world was red, crimson like drying blood. It wasn't water he stood in this time, but soil. Thick and wet. The stench of death lingered. Madara stood over the battlefield of his youth. The bodies of fallen Uchiha and Senju warriors littered the terrain, steam rising from their corpses as if the land itself rejected their passing. The battlefield was eerily silent until two voices screamed in unison. Tajima Uchiha. Butsuma Senju. They collided with the force of a typhoon, their blades sliding deep into each other's chests in a perfect cross-cut. Blood gushed in violent arcs. There was no hesitation from either warrior. A pact of death sealed by steel. Two heads of two clans lost in one moment. Madara screamed not aloud, but in his mind. He wanted to stop time or reverse it perhaps. To freeze it all before the killing blow. To run to his father. To scream for him not to strike. To intervene and slay Butsuma himself before it was too late. He wanted to challenge the reality unfolding before him to force it to bend to his will. But it had already happened. He couldn't stop it. The world around him shattered like glass as his Mangekyo Sharingan awakened on the spot. The unbearable rage. The broken heart. The overwhelming helplessness. His knees had buckled that day by his father's side, tears of blood streaming freely, not because he feared leadership or responsibility, but because it was now only him and Izuna. His father preserved as a constant longer than almost anybody else aside from Izuna in Madara's eyes at this point. From that day forward, he never looked at time the same again. If I had stopped it. If I had reversed it. The scene twisted. Shifted. New visions surged, memories of his failed attempts to use his Mangekyo abilities. Amenashihai. The right eye's power to freeze the time for a few seconds. But you cannot move other living beings aside from yourself in frozen time. Amenamiwari. The left eye's power to reverse time and record the now rewritten future in order to avoid it and reweave fate anew. Both had emerged during the decade of bloodshed following Tajima's death. But every time Madara tried to use them, his body would crumple. His chakra would dry up as if a desert had swallowed it whole. His life force buckled under the weight of time's demands. A dim candlelit room. Izuna lay on a futon, breath ragged. Madara stood over him, both hands trembling as his left eye glowed ominously. Amenamiwari, he whispered. Time bent, yet only slightly. A few seconds back. Izuna still dying. Again. Madara gritted his teeth, pouring in more chakra. The technique triggered but nothing changed. He tried again. And again. He had once tried to stop the final breath from leaving Izuna. To hold time in his hands like a broken cup and glue it back together. He failed. Again. Again. 100 times. The last time, he had screamed so hard his throat bled. The sky above the cult's hidden bastion was a swirl of churning gray clouds, heavy with unshed lightning. The mountainous keep that housed the heart of the cult of the bleeding eclipse sat carved into the bones of a forgotten peak, surrounded by eldritch wards that twisted the senses and swallowed all light. Deep within its obsidian halls, beneath chandeliers of dangling bones and blood-fed crystals, sat the throne of Lord Sivith Mulgoros, Archon of the Eclipse and Master of the 11. A figure stumbled forward, scorched robes dragging behind him like a deflated banner. His once regal horns were singed at the tips, and blood dribbled freely from the corner of his lips as he dropped to one knee. The emerald flames of the hall flickered against the bruised and broken flesh of Xantrax the Whispering Pyre, his pride as tattered as his cloak. He dared not look up. My lord. I failed. A silence followed, long and suffocating. Then, slow, deliberate footsteps echoed from the elevated dais. Failed, came the voice. It was neither loud nor harsh, but every syllable carried the weight of ancient, calculated cruelty. You, my faithful Xantrax. One of my generals. Defeated. Alone. My lord, he is not of this world. I thought him a wandering survivor. A lone anomaly. But his power. Xantrax raised his head slightly, teeth bared in frustrated disbelief. He absorbed my sorcery. Not deflected. Not resisted. Absorbed it, devoured it, and twisted it into something else. His presence, it cracked the air. And his eyes, my lord. Like burning eclipses. Eyes. The color of sorrow and apocalypse. They tore through my teleportation magic like gossamer. I barely escaped with my life, and only through the mercy of my amulet. A low murmur echoed in the chamber, the laughter of the unseen, of robed priests and twisted high sorcerers who lined the great hall in their meditative silence. But their mirth was brittle. Their glares wary. Lord Sivith stepped forward, descending from his bone-forged throne, his robes made of fused flesh and abyssal silk dragging like the tail of a void serpent. A man who defeated Xantrax, and now sleeps in the forest, unguarded. Sivith circled his general slowly, then knelt with one hand cupping the cultist's chin. He is not human. Not fully. Xantrax trembled under the pressure of that gaze. I do not believe he knows what he is. Yet. But if left alone, he will grow. His body is changing and consuming this world's energies. Magicals flow through him like a divine host. Then he is a seed. One that must never blossom. Sivith rose and turned to the shadows at the edge of the room. Azakal. Belmira. Two forms emerged from the obsidian walls as if conjured by Sivith's very will. One was tall, gaunt, and pale. His face a sculpted mask of metal with fangs curling from his jaw like ivory hooks. The other was a woman wrapped in sheer writhing fabric, her eyes glowing a dull silver, and her fingers long and clawed like jeweled daggers. Take Xantrax. Find the intruder. Slay him, and offer his soul to the black spiral. Burn whatever village shelters him. Bleed their fields. And bring me his eyes. If they remain intact. Azakal bowed without a word. Belmira licked her lips, amused. If he's handsome, I may ask to keep him after we're done flaying. Go. Sivith's voice thundered through the chamber. No more mistakes. Xantrax stood, shame buried under fresh resolve. Though his body screamed for rest, his eyes glowed with a green fire once more. He sleeps now, my lord. Vulnerable. When next I face him, he will fall. As the three vanished into shadow and smoke, Sivith stared toward the distant Jura forest with his eyes narrowed, smile absent. A beast has stirred in that cursed land. But even titans burn under my eclipse. The Jura forest, vast and ancient, stretched endlessly like a green ocean of swaying leaves and murmuring wind. Yet tonight, its natural harmony trembled. The air was heavy and warped by a strange rhythm, a heartbeat made of magicals, pulsing from somewhere deep within. All beasts had long since gone silent. Predator and prey alike dared not move. High above the canopies, three shadows flitted across the branches, weightless as phantoms. The air around them shimmered, disturbed by the flickering distortion of their cloaking spells. His aura, murmured Belmira the pale whale, her voice a honeyed whisper soaked in venom. It was buried before. Dormant. But now, it pulses like an infant sun. Xantrax, still bearing scars from his last encounter, clenched his jaw. He's unconscious. Has to be. I felt no resistance when I extended the scent of embers toward the source. It was like feeling a god exhale in his sleep. Unconscious. Yet leaking power like a cracked divine core, said Azakel the hollow howl, whose breath echoed with a mechanical rasp. He sleeps with one eye open, I'll wager. They stopped at a cliff edge. Beneath them, nestled against the edge of a wide glade, was a crude village formed of rapidly built wood-style structures, primitive but sturdy. Smoke trailed gently from campfires. At the center of the settlement, bathed in moonlight, was a structure surrounded by anxious goblins and dire wolves. Inside, a man lay completely still, bathed in pale moonlight, as if entombed in serenity. Madara Uchiha. Confirm it again, Xantrax ordered, voice low. If we strike too soon and it's a trap. It is not, Azakel said simply. The villagers are too loud, too hopeful. They think him safe. They think they can protect him. Fools. Velmira's nails extended into glistening claws of silver bone. We kill the guards first. Let the rest watch their hero be dragged out like carrion. No, Xantrax replied, his earlier shame smothered beneath a smoldering wrath. We do not rush. He crushed me without even drawing a blade. His body is changing, so we will strike now, yes, but we bleed the village dry before we even reach him. Grind down their resolve. Break their unity. Only then do we remind them of despair. Azakel nodded. A classic spread. I take the eastern barrier. Velmira, the well. Kill their water runners. Xantrax, you circle wide. When I signal, rain green fire on their supplies. No structures. Force them to stay clustered. Xantrax's grin was sharp and humorless. And then I claim his head. As one, they vanished into the dark, leaving behind only a faint warble in the air, and the quiet promise of annihilation. 2 days later. The stillness of the village was deceptive. Goblins moved with purpose but carried a subtle nervousness in their strides. Though the crude houses had been standing for only days, there was already the feel of home here, of purpose, structure, safety. That fragile sense of peace had been forged under the shadow of one man. And that man still had not stirred. Inside his wood-carved shelter, Madara lay unmoving on the floor, his breath slow, almost meditative. His body radiated quiet menace even in repose, and though many avoided looking too long, some kept watch day and night with the reverence of priests guarding a shrine. At the edge of the village, Gobta paced anxiously while Rigyur, the goblin chief's son, watched the dark tree line with narrowed eyes. I don't like this, Rigyur muttered. Too quiet. Not a single beast sighted all day. And the birds. They stopped singing yesterday morning. Gobta, always one to speak with humor even under stress, forced a grin. Maybe they're scared of us now, huh? Madara-sama's presence is that scary. Rigyur didn't laugh. Then a low growl echoed through the stillness. Ranga emerged from the shadows of the central longhouse. His massive frame moved with terrifying grace, hackles raised, lightning barely visible in his fur. The air is wrong, Ranga said, nose twitching. It stinks of fire and death. Like old blood reheated. Gobta straightened. How close? Very, came the rumble. 3 distinct scents. Old. Familiar in a way that makes me want to tear the forest down. Just as Ranga finished, a flicker of green fire erupted in the sky far beyond the eastern tree line. Then a second near the well. Then a third closer by the food stores. Attack! Someone screamed, and chaos burst loose like a struck drum. 3 separate shockwaves rocked the outskirts of the village. Screams rose as goblins scrambled to rally and wolves howled, forming defensive lines with surprising coordination. Smoke began curling upward in plumes. Not buildings yet, but their stores and water reserves were ablaze. Rigyur's father, the goblin chief, though battered from his wound days ago, still shouted over the din with deafening force, defend the village. Protect Madara-sama's body at all costs. The fate of us all lies within that house. Ranga growled, turning his gaze toward the west. One of them is circling wide. He's trying to flank the Sente. Before he could finish, Velmira landed in the center of the village with a quiet gust of wind. Her claws shimmered, and her smile was far too pleased. So many pretty little monsters. All guarding their god. She slashed 2 goblins in a blink, her movements liquid and cruel. Gobta rushed in with a short sword, narrowly blocking a blow meant to decapitate a young goblin boy. I'm the crazy one here. He shouted, trembling. So if you're gonna take someone, take me. Ranga flashed forward and met Velmira head-on, claws clashing with hers. Lightning crackled and flames burst in the background. At the same time, Ezekiel tore through the outer barricade, splitting a dire wolf in half with a massive spinning blade that floated around him like a halo. He seemed barely engaged, humming to himself while whispering spellwork in forgotten tongues. Give us the man, he called out lazily, and we'll leave your broken bodies in peace. Rigir shouted defiantly, standing beside his father with a spear in hand. You won't have him. Madara-sama is. Before he could finish, Ezekiel appeared before him with a pulse of magic, blade raised. But was just barely intercepted by Ranga's teeth, biting into his leg with savage force. Meanwhile, at the very back of the village, Xantrax stood with arms folded, watching it all. He looked at the longhouse housing Madara's body with a cold expression. His amulet glowed faintly. So you sleep while your beasts bleed for you. No matter. When they fall, and your heart rests still. Our master will feed on your soul like honeyed wine. Bathed in the eerie glow of his dream realm, Madara stood once again in the star-lit waterscape of his inner world. The familiar sensation of ankle-deep water and celestial orbs shifting overhead no longer unnerved him. Here, under the black sky dappled with massive blue and red stars rotating slowly around a darkened moon, his mind stirred restlessly. Yet, this time, no apparition greeted him, not Hagoromo, Indra, or Asura. Just silence. He stood still, water rippling beneath his bare feet, arms crossed in deep contemplation. Amenashihai. Amenamiwari. He muttered aloud. His voice echoed against the walls of the void. Ever since his Mangekyo awakened, those two abilities had tormented him. Amenashihai, the power to stop time yet never more than a sliver of a second. And Amenamiwari, his left eye's power to rewind time, had failed him when it mattered most, when Izuna lay dying, when he needed it to count. The anguish of that moment still weighed on his soul. Why? Why couldn't I stop it? Why couldn't I change it? He asked himself. He replayed every attempt in his memory, the countless situations where Amenashihai flickered to life for mere milliseconds, just long enough to be noticed but never long enough to truly act. The chakra cost was astronomical, beyond what even his prodigious reserves could consistently supply. Amenamiwari was no better. It refused to turn back time far enough to undo death, functioning like a broken hourglass that only twisted fleeting moments. His fists clenched. What's the point of having the eyes of a god if they can't even save the people that matter? Then, an old glossed-over detail resurfaced from his previous mindscape conversation. Hagoromo's voice ranged through his mind. Your eyes, Madara, now carry the weight of our entire lineage, not just your own hatred and hope, but the dreams and burdens of Indra and Asura alike. They no longer reflect a singular purpose. They are possibility incarnate. Indra's words soon followed. Think of your eyes now as a tapestry. A spiritual merger. The eternal Mangekyo born from Izuna's sacrifice, empowered by my soul's legacy, and shaped through your path. No other Uchiha in history has borne what you now possess. Madara closed his eyes in thought. The concept was profound. Not just evolution, but transcendence. His Sharingan, Mangekyo, and Rinnegan were no longer sequential stages, they were facets of a singular, holistic eye. The pathways between them had collapsed, interwoven by fate and magical fusion. These were eyes that could no longer be defined by known limits. Time itself wasn't just a toy to play with, it was a canvas, and he was beginning to see the strokes left behind by every moment that passed. They are everything, he whispered to himself. Past, present, future, possibility. Clarity settled upon him like a silent snowfall. He had been asking the wrong questions. It wasn't about what his eyes couldn't do. It was about what they hadn't become yet. They were not broken. They were still becoming. And it was his task to push them further. Suddenly, a thunderous boom vibrated through the dreamscape. The ripples in the water pulsed outward violently. Madara turned his head. Another explosion rocked the serenity. He heard screams, metal clashing, the snarls of wolves, and the war cries of goblins. The battle was bleeding into his mind, his subconscious trying to rouse him. He saw flashes of Ranga bearing fangs, of Rigurd limping with both legs crushed, defying a cultist general with a sword pointed at his throat. Another voice shouted, Hand him over, or all of you will perish. Yet they refused. Madara's eyes opened inside the mindscape, glowing violet as magicules began to mix more violently with his chakra, filling the void around him with arcs of surging energy. His body, the real one, shuddered. The world around the unconscious Madara darkened. A pressure so violent and primal began to condense. And then, a single, blinding surge of energy erupted from his body, sending a shockwave through the battlefield. Magicules and chakra merged perfectly, exploded outward like a pulsar of pure energy. Madara Uchiha had awoken. With his eternal Mangekyo Sharingan fully active and his new hybrid aura flaring like the wrath of an ancient god, the enemies paused in horror. He rose, slowly, eyes burning like twin comets. The evolved aura, cold, crushing, ancient, however nascent feeling radiated from him in waves that could be felt across the Jura forest. No, it was breaking beyond the borders of the forest. The storm had finally awakened. The very ground split. A sound like a heart bursting echoed from the longhouse, the place where Madara had been sleeping. And then, from within the haze of magic and fire, a cold voice cut through the chaos. You shouldn't have touched them. A massive ribcage made of chakra erupted from the dirt, encasing the battlefield in the shadow of Madara's Susanoo. Velmira gasped, her will stuttering, and she began backtracking. Azakal turned, but it was too late. A giant skeletal hand formed from the ribcage, snapping shut around his armored body in one swift motion. With a low rumble, the hand clenched. Crack. Steel bent. Flesh popped. Bone shattered. Azakal didn't even scream, he was simply crushed. The hand released, and what remained of the general fell in a twisted heap, unrecognizable. Madara stepped forth from the ribcage's shadow, now fully awake, his hair waving from the residual aura flooding off him. I allowed you to get away last time, ugly, he said, brushing dust from his arm. This time you will know true despair and die here unknown and unmourned. As he locked eyes with Xantrax. Velmira, lips trembling, quickly threw both hands outward, summoning a dozen portals in desperation. Then die in a sea of zealots. Madara's eyes flashed. He vanished. The blink of an eye, he vanished, body flicker movement so fast it blurred the air, and reappeared behind her. Crack. His backhand struck the side of Velmira's face like a meteor, violently spinning her into her own portal. The gate collapsed mid-cast, swallowing her entirely before it shut. The other portals began to close before stopping and then turning into a burning golden flame that covered each portal area. All cultists that were touched by the flame slowly disappeared in a glimmer. Coincidence or fate, Madara didn't care. All gates were shut. Xantrax stood frozen, staring at the smoldering edge of the closing portals. No, not her too. His face twisted in fury and panic. He looked across the field to Rigard, the goblin chief, who had just managed to rise to one knee, body bruised but spirit intact. You monsters, you dare protect him. Then die for him. Xantrax blinked across the field with a burst of shadow magic and sword drawn, poised to impale Rigard from behind. But the moment his blade was inches from Rigard's back, the world froze. A ripple of twilight energy burst out from Madara's right eye. The air crystallized. Leaves hung still in mid-fall. The fire in broken huts ceased its flickering. Even magicules, stilled. Only Madara moved. His right eye, glowing with the evolved Mangekyo, now revealed its terrible truth. Amenishihai, the heavenly rain. And for the first time since its awakening, time was stopped, for more than just a heartbeat. So it finally works. Madara walked casually across the frozen battlefield, approaching the suspended Xantrax like a statue caught mid-swing. He stared into the cultist's frenzied face and sneered. You would have killed him. Because you couldn't kill me. He leaned in, whispering. How fragile your cause must be, if your wrath turns to peasants when your gods fail you. Madara raised one hand, flicking it lazily. Time resumed. Xantrax blinked just in time to realize he was surrounded by Rinnegan rods, each buried deep in his body. Shlink. 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 His limbs failed. His magic died. His knees hit the dirt. What is this? Madara looked down at him coldly. Suppression. Of chakra. Of magicules. Of lies. Xantrax spat blood. You don't get. You don't understand what's coming. Our divine master will reduce you to ash. Madara tilted his head, amused. You talk about your master like a dog speaks of its owner. It's pathetic. And if your gods are real, then let them mourn you. He stepped back, raising his hand. Above, the clouds churned unnaturally, forming a swirling mass of storm-twisted black. A deep pulse echoed through the clearing. Lightning style. Phantom judgment. From the heavens descended a bolt of black-violet lightning, thick as a tree trunk and twice as loud as thunder. Boom. Xantrax didn't scream. There was no time. There was only silence after. A crater remained. Not a body. Not even bone. Just the scent of ozone and a smoking circle in the dirt. Madara lowered his hand, exhaled, and allowed the Rinnegan to fade. Behind him, the goblins began to stir. The village, though wounded, still stood. He's gone. Madara-sama. Rigyur, Gobta, and Ranga all knelt, trembling not in fear, but reverence. And Madara stood still, absorbing the moment. Not for glory. Not for pride. But because, for once, someone had refused to abandon him. And in their defense, he had chosen not to abandon them. Absolutely. Here's a detailed, emotional scene of the goblin burial immediately following the battle, capturing Madara's perspective and the village's grief, while continuing the tone of reflection, somber growth, and the first signs of Madara's deeper bond forming with his new people. Burial beneath the crimson sky. The morning after the battle brought no sunlight, only an overcast sky, painted in muted grays and deep blues. The storm that had raged the night before had passed, but its echo lingered in the soil, wet and soft underfoot. Madara stood at the edge of the village clearing, arms folded across his bare chest, watching as the goblins solemnly gathered the fallen. A few direwolves padded silently at their sides, noses down, ears low, mourning in their own, quiet way. The scent of blood still clung faintly to the earth, but it was no longer a stench of violence, it was something sacred now. A testament. Nearly 100 bodies, most of them among the nameless extras he had granted names to just days prior, now lay still, some barely recognizable, others preserved in expressions of pain, fear, but also resolve. Rigyur knelt beside his wounded father, whose leg had been bound and splinted. Despite the chief's injuries, he had refused to remain in the infirmary, demanding to stand witness to the burial of those who had given their lives to protect the village and Madara. Madara's hand clenched slightly as he watched a young goblin child, a girl, no older than 6, tug on her mother's hand and ask, "Will they come back like Master did?" The mother said nothing. She only knelt and pulled her daughter close. Madara approached slowly, boots silent on the wet grass. "No," he answered quietly, stopping just short of them. "They will not." The girl looked up at him, startled, not afraid, but searching for something. She didn't speak again, just nodded and held her mother tighter. Ranga was the first to begin digging. Despite his size, he moved with reverence, claws scooping earth with careful precision. The goblins followed his lead, digging trenches by hand or with makeshift tools, working until their bodies trembled from exertion. No one asked Madara to help. No one expected him to. But after a moment of silent hesitation, he extended his hand. The air shimmered with chakra as he formed a series of hand signs. From the base of the hill, long fingers of earth erupted. Wood style. Gentle grave embrace. Massive wooden branches sprouted from the ground and wove together in a respectful cradle, gently accepting each body as if the forest itself mourned alongside them. The burial took hours. When the last body had been placed within the braided wood, Madara stood before the silent crowd. His expression was unreadable as his face was calm, voice neutral, but his eyes burned with something unspoken. "I named them," he said. "They followed me, even though they didn't know me. And they fought to protect me without question. No one responded. They didn't need to." Madara's gaze moved to the mound of earth and wood now housing his dead. They were loyal, fierce, and worthy of remembrance. He didn't offer platitudes. He didn't say they would be watching from beyond, or that their sacrifice guaranteed peace. He wasn't that kind of man. But what he offered, instead, was honest. "I will not forget them." A long silence followed. Then, one by one, the goblins began to kneel, first Rigyur, then the elder goblins, then the youngest. Even the wolves lowered their heads, tails curled around their paws. Madara remained standing. He closed his eyes. Let himself breathe in the air. The cold, the quiet, the weight of death, and the burden of the living who remained. And for the first time in decades, perhaps longer, he felt something stir in the void of his soul that wasn't anger or pain. Royal capital of Sarian, throne of twilight flame. The throne room was as still as the stars above, the obsidian walls aglow with glyphs of elven design. Crystalline vines of magic light ran like veins along the marble columns. At the far end, atop an elevated platform of duskwood, Empress Elmesia El Rusarian reclined upon her throne. Her long silver hair cascaded in rivers over her armored robes, and her gold-inlaid circlet shimmered faintly beneath the celestial array projected on the dome above her. She was not alone. Lining the perimeter of the room stood 6 high-ranking elven mages and war scribes, and behind her chair, the captain of her royal guard stood vigil. Then a noise. A royal messenger burst through the outer doors, panting heavily, sweat clinging to his elegant robes. He fell to one knee before the empress. You came rushing from the observation sanctum. Speak, she said, her voice calm yet commanding. The mage swallowed hard before answering. Your Majesty, Veldora, the storm dragon, his aura has vanished. The chamber fell silent. A ripple of hushed gasps spread among the nobles standing near the court's edges. Elmesia's brows drew slightly together, but her voice did not rise. Something has happened to Veldora. Did he finally pass away within his barrier? Doubtful, Your Majesty. The dragon's overwhelming magical signature vanished completely. But we believe the dragon was usurped. Around the same time Veldora disappeared, a roughly equal aura but somehow veiled. Hard to read, but present all the same appeared in the forest with both having extremely close points of origin on our maps. Another mage entered behind him, trembling with a scroll in hand. We had the sensor units triple-check the readings. At first, we thought it was a fluctuation, but what's there now? It's something different. Something cold. Tyrannical. Tyrannical. Elmesia stood slowly. You mean like a demon lord? No, Your Majesty, the first mage said shakily. That would be easier to explain. This aura, it's unbridled. Burning freely, endlessly with supreme uncharted potential. Like a sentient storm compressed into the shape of a man. It's oppressive. It feels like something out of a myth. Another one of the seers compared it to the sensation of drowning beneath a frozen ocean of power, yet it is searing when you delve into it. Another claimed it felt darker, yet strangely balanced. Harmonious. The room fell utterly silent. You're saying something or someone has replaced Veldora's influence? Elmesia asked, her voice now a shade colder. Yes, Your Majesty. It's still growing. Not chaotic like the dragon, either. It feels deliberate, measured, heavy. Like the pressure of judgment itself. And just moments ago. He hesitated again. Continue. We all felt it. Even those without the sight. That presence surged again only for a moment, but even you, I believe, must have sensed it. Elmesia's lips parted just slightly. Indeed, a few minutes ago, she had paused mid-thought during a political report, her eyes flicking southward toward the Jura forest. She had felt it. A chilling ripple against her skin, a pressure that seemed to brush the edges of her soul. A presence that didn't scream or roar, it loomed. It was watching. She turned away from the messenger and moved to the great window overlooking the inner gardens. Her gaze pierced the horizon, though the Jura lay far beyond what mortal sight could reach. So, someone replaced Veldora. And maybe even stronger. She turned to her most trusted attendant. Summon the High Council. I want all archives related to ancient sealing methods, otherworldly beings, and magical anomaly myths opened. But Your Majesty, myths, why? I don't know what it is yet, she murmured, but I suspect what we're sensing isn't magic in its pure or even natural form. It's something else, refined and interwoven. And whoever this being is, they didn't just stumble into Veldora's prison and leave him. They most certainly meddled. She glanced again toward the Jura forest. Begin surveillance immediately. Her voice was soft, but every courtier in the room heard the weight of it all. Her voice turned resolute. I want full environmental readings, aura residuals, and magical displacement patterns within a 10-mile radius. Focus on any nexus points. Meeting agent. As the chamber emptied out, Elmesia remained, her thoughts racing. In all her years, no such shift had ever occurred. To dethrone a true dragon, even symbolically, was no small thing. Whatever or whoever had taken Veldora's place, it was no coincidence. Something ancient had stirred. Back at the Goblin village. A few days had passed since the battle. The Goblin village was still bruised and battered, but the repairs were well underway. Makeshift structures had already been replaced with more solid ones, thanks to Madara's wood style. Still, the results were crude, lacking finer details like glass windows, polished surfaces, or tools beyond the basics. Madara stood atop a high branch overlooking the village below. The goblins and direwolves were working tirelessly under Rigur's coordination, with Ranga acting as the ever-watchful protector. Yet despite the progress, Madara's crimson eyes narrowed slightly. These creatures. They're eager. But they lack skill. That was when Rigur approached him from the base of the tree. Lord Madara, a moment of your time. Madara leapt down effortlessly, his presence alone causing the surrounding goblins to stop and bow their heads. Speak. Rigur bowed. We don't have the artisans or craftsmen needed to make real structures, not like what I've heard of in Dworgen. Dworgen? Madara asked. The Dwarven Kingdom, Rigur explained. A bastion of technology, stonework, and metallurgy. They are said to be unmatched in building and crafting. If we had their help, we could build a true city. Madara considered this. And they would help us. Why? Perhaps they wouldn't, but some of our traders from before the wolves came had dealings with them. If we sent a small party, we might be able to request help or hire builders. Madara remained silent for a moment. Then he nodded. Fine. Gather a small envoy. Ranga, Gobta, and a few others. Send them immediately. Ranga padded forward from the shadows. I shall ensure their safety, Lord Madara. Time skip. 1 week later. 7 days passed. The goblins continued their work, but Madara had grown increasingly aware that something was wrong. The dwarves had not returned. Not a single message. Seated in silence near the fire pit he had constructed, Madara narrowed his eyes. Ranga should have returned by now. Even with travel and negotiation, something feels off. One of the goblins timidly approached. Lord Madara. Is this normal? Does travel to Dworgen take this long? Madara didn't answer immediately. He stared into the fire. No, to my knowledge, they should have been back 2 days ago. He finally muttered. Something is wrong. He rose to his feet. His aura pulsed. Prepare a supply pack. I will go myself. King Gazel Dwargo sat upon his great stone throne, deep in thought. Reports had reached his ears of Veldora's disappearance. But what disturbed him more were the recent tremors of a new presence. His mages reported a chakra-like energy signature radiating out of Jura forest like an invasive pulse. Cold, yet searing to the senses. A soldier bursts through the doors. Your Majesty. The monster prisoners we detained a week ago. Yes, what of them? We believe they were emissaries. They came from the forest, not rogue beasts. And now, that presence draws closer. Our censor mages say it might even rival Veldora. Gazel stood immediately. Rival. Veldora. The soldier nodded, pale. And it's approaching Dworgen. Slowly. Unrelentingly. Gazel turned to the side and called for his most trusted blacksmiths. Kaijin. Kurobe. Garm. I need you all. Now. Kaijin appeared moments later. What is it, Your Majesty? Gazel clenched his fists. I need a favor. One last favor. That monster emissary you turned away. He may not be a monster at all. If he's coming here, he might be something else entirely. Kaijin raised an eyebrow. And what do you want us to do? Be ready to meet him. Offer terms. Gifts if needed. But be respectful. I don't want a war with whatever that is. The stone beneath their feet trembled subtly. A cold wind blew through the hall despite no open doors. Kaijin swallowed. Understood. We'll prepare. Gazel stared forward, expression grim. Let us pray we are not already too late. The Jura forest, ever ancient and vast, breathed in hushed awe. Birds chirped only when far from him. Wind whispered only once he passed. The air trembled beneath an unseen pressure, a rhythmic pulse like the heart of the world itself held its breath in his presence. Madara Uchiha walked alone. The goblin village had long since disappeared behind him, replaced by endless trees and underbrush. But unlike before, nothing stood in his path. Monsters, large and small, stalked through the woods in wary silence, yet none dared approach. Even predators whose magicals dwarfed most lesser creatures slinked into the shadows when he drew near. Some hissed. Others postured. All retreated. He noticed it gradually, the complete lack of resistance. At first, it seemed coincidence. A path less traveled. But as the hours wore on and the terrain grew more treacherous, the pattern held. Every beast he passed kept its distance, watching him with a mix of hunger and terror, only to flee the moment he turned his gaze. Even those that crept too close, perhaps emboldened by hunger or curiosity, halted suddenly, frozen by some primal instinct. When they truly saw him, felt the depthless weight of his power leaking outward like a coiled storm, they ran. He narrowed his eyes. So even here, they know to fear what they don't understand. He continued forward, cloak rippling gently in the breeze, his aura tightening slightly so the forest would not crumble beneath it. It was not compassion, it was discipline. The sun had barely begun its descent when Madara reached the edges of a worn road carved into the woods. It was clearly man-made. Signs of cart wheels, footprints, and metal-shod boots were faintly visible in the dirt. A trade route, likely leading toward Dworgen. He followed it without concern. After an hour of walking, the sound of laughter echoed ahead. Boisterous. Drunk. A group of humans rounded the bend. Adventurers by their armor and scattered weapons, 4 men and a woman, though the woman hung back behind the largest of them, a towering brute with a thick beard and a great axe strapped to his back. Oi, look at this bastard, the brute called, jabbing a thumb toward Madara. Wander in the trade route in robes and sandals. Must be one of those enlightened weirdos. Another laughed. He got silver on him, think. Or is that hair just painted? The brute stepped forward, clearly emboldened. Hey, you deaf. You walk past us like you're some prince or something. You lost, old man. Madara didn't stop walking. His eyes didn't even flick toward them. The brute snarled. Tch. Arrogant prick. He stepped directly into Madara's path, hand reaching for his axe. Madara halted, not because of the man's words but because the wind had stilled again. As if even nature was holding its breath. You bark loudly, Madara said at last, voice low and cold. But you have no bite. The brute scoffed. Oh, you got jokes, huh? Madara's eyes flared red, the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan fully unveiled. In an instant, the brute staggered. His eyes widened. His breath caught. He looked around in confusion and saw the sky had darkened. The road had vanished. All that remained was a hellish landscape of crimson clouds and black stone. And then a colossal Susanoo rose behind Madara, gleaming with impossible energy. No, the brute whispered. What the hell is? The massive spectral warrior raised a foot and stomped directly onto the man, crushing him with cataclysmic force. In reality, the man simply collapsed, unconscious before his knees even hit the dirt. The rest of the adventurers stared in horror as foam formed at the brute's mouth. Madara didn't break stride. Let him dream of death. It suits him. The others scattered, dragging the unconscious brute behind them, too terrified to speak. Madara continued toward Dworgen, the path now cleared not by violence, but by fear itself. The moment Madara Uchiha stepped into the capital of Dworgen, the very air shifted. Clad in only bloodstained, tattered pants from his previous world, his powerful, bare upper body was a mass of sculpted muscle, wrapped in bandages over ancient scars and fresh wounds. Crimson eyes scanned the bustling underground entrance plaza as confused murmurs quickly gave way to whispers of dread. His appearance alone would have drawn attention, his aura magnified it tenfold. People in the marketplace froze mid-transaction, dropping sacks of grain or forgetting their haggling entirely, caught in a paralysis of awe and unease. The moment his sandaled foot hit stone, weaker adventurers doubled over or turned away, unable to meet the pressure. Several guards at the outer gate, clad in polished bronze armor and bearing halberds etched with faint runes, were already scrambling. One stumbled backward while the lead guard fumbled with a communication crystal. What the hell is that aura? Get the Prime Minister. Anyone. Now. Citizens waiting in lines to enter or leave the city began backing away in waves. A few turned and ran. Children wept in the distance, instinctively gripped by a primal fear they didn't understand. Madara walked without concern, his pace slow, measured. as if the surrounding chaos didn't exist. His bare chest rose and fell evenly. Despite the hundreds of eyes on him, his attention was on none of them. I suppose the price of walking shirtless into a city of steel and stone is fear, he muttered dryly. Just then, a pair of city officials rushed into the plaza. One was Kaijin, the respected dwarven blacksmith and diplomat, beard braided and hammer hanging from his belt. Beside him, stiff and self-important, was the Prime Minister Vesta. Kaijin approached with calm diplomacy, even smiling faintly. You there, traveler. We heard reports of your impressive entrance. I am Kaijin, a craftsman and statesman of Dworgen. May I ask your name and what brings you to our kingdom? Madara turned to face him, briefly regarding Kaijin with a dispassionate gaze. He said nothing for a moment, letting the silence stretch. Vesta, meanwhile, was furiously tapping the side of a magical monocle, his brows knitted. He'd been trying to appraise Madara from the moment he arrived. Strange. No readable skills or proficiencies. But the power fluctuations are insane. What the hell is this man? Madara's voice finally cut through the tension, low and controlled. I come from the Jura forest. I sent an envoy ahead of me. They have not returned. I have come to retrieve them. Kaijin glanced at Vesta, who froze mid-appraisal. A flicker of tension passed between them. Ah, Jura forest, yes, I've heard of a monster village forming out that way. Ranga and Gobta, correct. Madara nodded once. Well, it's just as you said. They were detained upon arrival a few days ago, but there's been debate over how to handle it. Perhaps this would best be discussed in a more comfortable setting. A meal, perhaps. Madara's eyes narrowed slightly, but he nodded. Lead the way. As Kaijin turned, Vesta scurried beside him, muttering under his breath. You can't be serious. That aura, he's dangerous. He doesn't even have proper clothing. Kaijin rolled his eyes. And yet, you're still breathing, aren't you? Behind them, the streets slowly resumed their activity, though most still whispered about the half-naked demon who'd just entered the capital like a conquering god. And Madara followed behind them silently, like a shadow draped in regality and destruction, ready to pull threads and unravel destinies. Madara continued down the street with Kaijin and Vesta, the weight of his blood-soaked, tattered pants a reminder of his past world. His cloak billowed behind him, still stained from the battle with the cult, his hair slightly disheveled. Despite the chaos he'd caused in Dworgen, there was a growing sense of something new, something that had long since been foreign to him. With each pointed finger and hushed whisper, something in him stirred. Madara glanced to the side, his gaze narrowing as he thought to himself. I am a leader again now. A once proud clan head. A growing village leader. No more time to look like a wandering vagrant. But something in the back of his memories came to the light. Brother, you're the head of the clan. Can't you at least look the part? The voice was younger. Playful. Familiar. Madara saw it clearly. Izuna, arms crossed, eye narrowed, standing in front of a mirror with a brush in his hand. You can't keep showing up to meetings looking like you wrestled a bear. Again. He remembered scoffing. If appearance mattered, I'd rule with makeup instead of a fan. You're not wrong, Izuna had said, handing him a folded kosode, but it wouldn't kill you to not look like a traveling lunatic. The image faded. Madara's lips twitched faintly, the closest thing to a smile he'd managed in hours. He exhaled through his nose and turned to Kaijin, who was explaining something to Vesta. Kaijin, Madara spoke suddenly, his voice low but deliberate. Take me to a clothing store. I'm in need of new clothes. I've worn these rags long enough. Kaijin blinked. Huh, you want clothes? Madara's eyes half-lidded, his voice dry. Yes. It seems I've been mistaken for a vagabond one too many times today. Vesta coughed into his hand, not bothering to hide a smirk. Madara glanced his way. Careful. Or you're going to be the one paying for them. Kaijin chuckled heartily. There's a good place not far from here run by elves. They do tailoring and enchantments. Best in Dworgen. Good, Madara replied, already veering in that direction. It's time I dressed like someone who doesn't live in a cave. He couldn't stay in tattered clothing forever. Kaijin raised an eyebrow, but his expression softened at the suggestion. Of course, Lord Madara. I'll have the best in Dworgen take care of you. Vesta looked back and forth between Madara and Kaijin, curious. Lord Madara, you seek clothes. With that aura, he waved a hand toward Madara. No one would dare let you approach their store. Yet you are here asking for clothing. Madara just nodded, ignoring the question for now. The trio continued walking, with Madara noticing the people around them stepping aside, giving the towering presence that was Madara a wide berth. Even the most seasoned adventurers or soldiers would flinch involuntarily as he passed, the weight of his aura felt by all. Kaijin led them to a bustling elven clothing store, one with long, elegant wooden pillars adorned with intricate carvings, a soft light pouring out of the glass windows. The sense of fresh cloth and wood filled the air. Upon entering, the trio was greeted by an elven shopkeeper, a middle-aged woman with vibrant red hair braided tightly at the back of her head, and a young, curious elf girl standing beside her. Welcome to the elven craft, the woman greeted, her voice warm and inviting. How may I assist you, sir? Madara observed the shop for a moment, then finally spoke. I require a new set of clothes. My current attire is not fitting for someone of my position. The elf girl looked up at him with wide, inquisitive eyes, tilting her head. Oh, you don't look like the kind of man who needs something new, mister. She spoke in a melodic tone, both innocent and curious. You have this powerful presence about you, so imposing, but you look ragged. Madara finished for her, his voice calm, though there was a slight edge to it. Yes, I know. That's why I'm here. I need something better suited for my position. Vesta, standing next to him, couldn't help himself. You do look like you're in need of a makeover, he muttered under his breath, his tone a mix of sarcasm and amusement. Madara's sharp eyes flickered toward Vesta for a moment, his irritation clear but unspoken. He didn't respond, only gesturing for the tailor to begin their work. The elven woman nodded quickly and motioned for the elf girl to fetch some measurement tools. We can certainly help with that. Let's get started, shall we? We have many fine materials to work with. As the elf girl began to measure Madara, she couldn't help but glance up at him. I've never seen a man like you before. So strong, so tall. You have a very distinct aura. She blinked up at him, almost as though she were studying him. Are you a monster? Or a man? Madara didn't flinch at the question, though he found it slightly amusing. I am a man, he said simply, but paused as he caught sight of the young elf's curiosity. Though, I guess, you could say I am both. In a way. The girl frowned, clearly unsure. I've never heard anyone say that before. Kaijin cleared his throat, stepping in with a subtle smile. It is better left unexplained, dear. But rest assured, Lord Madara is no monster. Vesta, who had been unusually quiet up until now, suddenly spoke. Lord Madara, I've been meaning to ask, how do you control your aura? You're so strong, and yet, your presence is, Vesta hesitated, choosing his words carefully. It is uncontained. Surely someone of your strength can manage it. Madara paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. Control is something that I still have. At least for the most part. Suppression is what has become a true challenge. He glanced at the elf girl as she finished measuring his chest and waist. I was never one for subtlety, yet I mastered the art. But now, my aura has become increasingly difficult to suppress. The power within me is unlike anything the world has seen. At this, the elf girl stared at him with wide eyes, clearly intrigued. She touched the edge of her chin thoughtfully. You're not just being arrogant, you truly believe this, don't you? I've never felt anything like what radiates from you. It's like chalk, Madara said, catching himself before he finished the word, noticing the girl's attention still stuck to him like glue. Magicules, he quickly corrected. That's what you would call it here. The girl's eyes sparkled as she absorbed this information. Magicules, she repeated, savoring the word. What is that like? How do you control such power? Madara gave her a short glance before answering, his tone a little colder than before. It's not about control. It's about balance. I've spent a long time learning how to harness my power. But still, I need to master the subtleties all over again. You are right about that. The elf girl pressed further. How old are you, if you don't mind me asking? Madara almost hesitated but then answered, the word coming naturally. 97. Vesta's eyes widened, clearly not believing him. 97. You look barely a day over 20. Madara's expression didn't shift. I assure you, I am 97 years of age. And every bit of it spent fighting, surviving. He paused, before adding, almost to himself, some things just don't change, no matter how many years pass. The elf girl continued to look at him with fascination, almost as though she didn't quite believe what she was hearing. But how do you look so young? And your presence. It feels like power, ancient power. Years aren't everything, Madara responded. And my presence. He gave a brief shrug. It is what it is. I don't need to be anyone's idea of what's normal. Kaijin, who had been silent until now, decided to step in before the conversation dragged on too much. Lord Madara, let's get you fitted properly. If you're done explaining your age to the lovely young elf, he said with a small chuckle, glancing at the girl. Perhaps you should sit while we begin tailoring your new attire. As Madara settled into the fitting chair, Vesta grew increasingly restless. His curiosity about Madara had reached its peak, and the more he watched him, the more he began to feel the weight of Madara's power pressing down on him. But he didn't dare press further, not just yet. After the fittings were done, Madara was shown several styles. However, he had his own designs in mind. He illustrated on paper clearly a custom outfit along with the Uchiha clan symbol that he wanted tailored, then the elf pair got to work. Madara's outfit. Upper garment Kosode style battle robe deep obsidian black, form-fitting to allow for motion yet draping with authority. The collar was sharp and open like a kimono warrior's, bordered in pristine white. Along each sleeve's edge, 3 choku tomo were embroidered with faint silver threading. Lower garment tucked hakama-style shinobi pants, jet black shinobi trousers reinforced for agility, with tailored wraps around the calves and ankles for movement. Waist obi belt and overwrap. A layered black obi sash over a formal-style cloth wrap, detailed in subtle gray thread. Arm and foot wraps, rebound in newly dyed black. Clan symbol. A large crimson and white Uchiha fan crest sewn boldly onto the back of his outer robe. I would like this pendant, too, but switch out the design on it for the one I drew earlier. Madara said, pointing at the necklace. The elf girl raised an eyebrow but said nothing as she unlocked the jewelry case to grab the necklace. She watched him carefully as he slipped the amulet around his neck. Do you mind if I ask what this symbol is? The elf girl asked curiously. It's not a typical one. It's beautiful, yet mysterious. Madara took a long, thoughtful pause before he answered. It's from my past. A symbol of my clan. The Uchiha clan. He wasn't expecting the elf girl to ask more, but her curiosity was piqued. What's the meaning behind it? Madara briefly explained. In his cold, detached way, the Uchiha clan is one of the most powerful warrior clans from my homeland. Our symbol represents strength, fire, blood, and the eternal will to protect what's ours. It meant everything to me. She nodded, though it was clear she didn't fully understand the weight of his words. It meant everything. You say it as if it doesn't exist anymore. Madara, looking over to make eye contact, responded, because it doesn't exist anymore. I am the sole surviving member of the Uchiha clan left in this world. By the time Madara was finished, Vesta and Kaijin were both more than ready to leave. Madara's expression turned to a frown as the cost came up, and he realized he had no money to pay. Vesta looked at him blankly, and Madara was ready to leave without the payment when he suddenly turned to Vesta. Do you mind paying for this? Madara asked calmly, turning to Vesta. Before Vesta could respond, Madara subtly used his genjutsu to ensure the man would obey without hesitation. You'll pay for this, Madara repeated, and then I'll be on my way. Vesta, still under the genjutsu's influence, nodded blankly. Of course, Lord Madara. As Vesta fumbled to pay, Madara gave a cold, calculated smile. Good. We'll be done here. Let's go. As the elven boutique's finely carved door swung shut behind them, the clinking of bells overhead marked Madara's departure in his new regalia. His footsteps were slow and deliberate, each stride cutting a path through the crowds, whose members instinctively stepped aside. His deep obsidian robe rippled in Dworgen's artificial lamplight, every choku tomo along the white-trimmed sleeves gleaming faintly with movement. The crimson Uchiha crest emblazoned boldly on his back marked him as something ancient and proud even if no one here understood its weight. Kaijin, striding beside him, whistled low in appreciation. Gotta admit, you clean up better than I expected. You looked like a revenant when we found you at the gate. Vesta trudged behind them, visibly irritated, scowling beneath a veneer of false composure. His gait was stiffer than earlier, likely from being humiliated and hypnotized in public twice now. Madara's crimson gaze moved to Kaijin. I have another request. Oh. Kaijin raised a brow. I need a weapon, one from my previous life. It's called a gunbai. Gunbai. Kaijin scratched his chin. Never heard of that term. What kind of weapon is it? Madara raised his hand, sketching the shape into the air. A large war fan, designed to both defend and strike. It can repel energy, conduct it, and when properly augmented, unleash devastating wind-based force. I used it in tandem with my magicules. Kaijin nodded slowly. Sounds like something between a shield and a magical conduit. But if you want it to channel magicules, that's no ordinary commission. I'd need materials that can absorb and circulate magical energy effectively. Not just conduct it, but synergize with it. I expected as much, Madara said. Clasping his hands together in a ram's seal, a thick plank of smooth, deep black wood, glistening faintly with life force ejected upwards from the ground. Alongside it, Madara created 4 Rinnegan rods, each about 5 feet long. The dwarf's eyes widened. This wood, what is this? He asked, running his fingers along the grain, which seemed to pulse faintly with arcane vitality. It's wood from my technique, Madara answered. Enhanced through countless years of natural and spiritual evolution. It absorbs energy quite hungrily and converts it. Kaijin picked up one of the Rinnegan rods. And these, I've never felt anything like this. They're practically thrumming with something alien. Madara nodded. If you're the best smith your kingdom has to offer, I assume this won't be an issue. Kaijin's face split into a wide grin. You kidding? With materials like this, I'll craft you a masterpiece. Give me a day. From behind, Vesta snorted. A day? For something this specialized? You can't be serious. Kaijin glanced back and chuckled. Still sore you got used like a purse with legs. Vesta flushed red. Madara turned to him, the corner of his mouth twitching in subtle amusement. Actually, I have one last favor. Before Vesta could protest, Madara's Sharingan flared subtly again, just enough to catch his gaze. Pay Kaijin in full, he said smoothly, with a generous tip for expedited service. Vesta nodded blankly. Of course, right away. Kaijin's laughter erupted like a drumroll. You know, I could get used to working with you. Dangerous, mysterious, stylish and rich, at least, vicariously. Madara raised a brow. I'm not rich. He just is. Temporarily. Kaijin slapped his thigh in amusement. Come on, let's eat. I know a quiet place. Might as well enjoy Vesta's wallet while it's still under your control. Madara offered a rare, faint smile. Lead the way. And with that, the trio headed deeper into Dworgan's lively inner ring, toward food, drink, and a night of conversations that would quietly shift the fate of the forest outside the walls. The restaurant Kaijin selected was a sturdy establishment of carved obsidian and enchanted oakwood beams, one of Dworgan's finer taverns. The atmosphere was warm and heavy with the scent of roasted meats, spiced root stews, and enchanted wines that shimmered faintly under the lantern light. Madara entered the establishment with Kaijin and a disgruntled Vesta trailing behind, still visibly fuming. The moment they stepped through the doors, conversation stuttered and fell silent as Madara's aura washed through the room like a slow, icy tide. Patrons turned toward the door, only to immediately avert their gazes, their instincts screaming that the newcomer was not to be trifled with. Still wearing his newly enchanted outfit, Madara exuded an almost oppressive dignity. The Uchiha crest on his back seemed to glow faintly in the dim tavern lighting, a symbol of something none could name but all instinctively respected or feared. They were led to a private booth in the back, warded by magic to muffle conversations and block outside scrutiny. The waiter barely maintained his composure as he took their order, stumbling slightly when Madara's crimson gaze passed over him. Kaijin ordered a heavy dwarven platter of seared boar, mashed cavern root, and black ale, while Madara simply requested meat. Something hot and filling. Vesta remained silent, arms crossed, giving Madara venomous side glances. When the food arrived, Madara ate with a composed efficiency. He hadn't eaten anything since his arrival in Dworgan besides the brief street fare on Vesta's coin, and now, in the relative quiet, he allowed himself to enjoy the sensation of warm food after years of war and cold earth. So, Kaijin began, slicing into his boar steak. You mentioned your people. A settlement in Jura Forest. What exactly are you building out there? Madara looked up from his plate. A home. Kaijin blinked, taken aback by the simplicity of the answer. A home. For monsters. Outcasts. Beings who would otherwise be hunted or enslaved, Madara added. I protect them. In return, they follow me. Loyalty built on action, not fear. Kaijin leaned forward slightly, intrigued. You speak like a king. You plan to found a nation. Madara paused, placing his utensils down. If that's what it takes. I've grown tired of destruction. This world has given me another chance, whether I asked for it or not. I won't waste it. From within his mind, Indra's voice echoed dryly. Look at you, Madara. Speaking like you did in your youth again. Ha, you really are getting soft. Hagoromo followed with a chuckle. No, not soft, but wiser. Perhaps this is your path, Madara. Asura chimed in with teasing warmth. You even thanked the tailor girls earlier. Who are you, and what have you done with the real Madara Uchiha? Madara mentally rolled his eyes. Quiet. Kaijin noticed Madara frowning but wisely chose not to ask. Vesta finally snapped, his voice low and sharp. What are you really, Uchiha Madara? No readable anything. I've been trying to analyze your skills and your mana signature but nothing. Even the spirit grade identifiers can't make sense of your reading. Madara took a slow sip of his drink before answering. Is it so important? Vesta scowled. You're clearly not a normal monster. And yet you stand there demanding prisoners, manipulating people. Kaijin raised a hand. Vesta, enough. He's answered everything he needs to. No, Madara said, wiping his mouth with a cloth. Let him speak. If he has doubts, better they come to light now. Vesta bristled, but remained quiet. Kaijin shifted the conversation. Why were your people arrested in the first place? Vesta responded bitterly. They arrived without proper documentation. No diplomatic emblem, no escort. They were detained until someone claimed them, which no one did. Standard protocol. Madara gave a quiet nod. Fair. But now I have. Kaijin leaned back. So what now? You said you were building a home. Do you need help building it? Madara looked him in the eye. I need artisans. Skilled hands. Those willing to work for something greater than gold. I can provide protection, resources, and purpose. Kaijin rubbed his beard. You know, I've been getting tired of palace contracts. Too much red tape, not enough heart. Asura's voice piped up in Madara's head. Oh ho! Are we seducing a dwarf craftsman now? Hagoromo snorted. He means recruit, Asura. Indra sighed. Can we go one conversation without commentary? Madara gave a faint sigh, ignoring them. Consider it, Kaijin. I won't ask again. Kaijin gave a grin. You won't need to. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, before Madara tapped the table. Before I forget. You're still under a royal system here, correct? Will my people face more issues like before? Kaijin hesitated. If they're registered, no. But politics in Dworgen are delicate. Even now, word of your presence has likely reached the king. Let him come, Madara said with a shrug. Vesta muttered something under his breath. Care to repeat that? Madara asked, voice cool. Kaijin quickly stepped in. Let's not ruin the meal. The waiter returned with the bill, and Madara turned to Vesta. Your turn, he said casually. Vesta blinked. Excuse me. You'll cover this meal. Consider it reparations. For inconvenience. Before Vesta could protest, Madara's Sharingan flared. The Prime Minister's eyes glazed over. Madara smiled. And a generous tip, if you please. Asura's laugh rang in his head. That's 2 meals you've stiffed him on. Should we keep score? Indra sighed again. How petty. I approve. Hagoromo, ever calm. Just remember, Madara. The path you walk now leaves echoes. Try not to stomp through the world with arrogance. Madara rose from his seat as Vesta mechanically paid and bowed to the staff. Enjoy your evening, he said smoothly. Kaijin grinned, downing the last of his drink. You're an interesting one, Madara. I'm glad we crossed paths. We'll see if you still say that after tomorrow, Madara replied. And with that, the night's dealings came to a close, but the alliance forming over food and fire would echo far beyond the stone halls of Dworgen. Vesta, despite being a man of authority, couldn't shake the unease crawling along his spine. Madara had requested no, instructed him to take him to the prison. The Prime Minister grit his teeth at the audacity. You're awfully demanding for someone without a title here, Vesta said as they reached the gates leading toward the military wing. Madara glanced at him sidelong, his crimson Sharingan half-lidded with boredom. And you're awfully talkative for someone who still smells of alcohol and failure. Kaijin chuckled under his breath, though he quickly tried to hide it with a cough. Vesta scowled. You want your monsters back, Uchiha. It's not as simple as snapping your fingers. No, Madara said, tone now sharp and cold. It's simpler. I ask. You hand them over. No snapping required. A subtle flare of Madara's chakra magical hybrid bled out for only a moment. It was not overwhelming, but sharp enough to make Vesta's knees lock in place. Sweat beaded on his temple. Enough, Kaijin cut in smoothly. Vesta, go cool your head. Get some air, maybe a pipe. I'll escort our guest the rest of the way. Vesta gave them both one last glare before turning on his heel. I'll be reporting this to the king, he muttered, disappearing around the corner. As they resumed walking, Kaijin cast a sideways glance at Madara. You're not exactly making friends. Friendship is optional. Results are not. Kaijin only hummed in response. As they passed through the next gate, the conversation shifted. Who do you have in mind for your town's construction crew? Kaijin asked. People like you. Reliable craftsmen. Warriors with good instincts. And people who know when to mind their business. Kaijin barked a laugh. Well, the last part narrows it down a bit. I've got 3 brothers. Talented builders. Armorers. Decent drinkers. Then ask them. Kaijin raised a brow. Just like that. No pitch. No negotiation. Madara shrugged. If they're not fools, they'll accept. Before Kaijin could respond, Vesta rejoined them, adjusting his coat with an air of defiance. The king has been informed. Do what you will. I won't stop you. They arrived at the prison gate, where a team of guards patrolled warily. The moment they spotted Madara, magic detecting artifacts in the walls flickered erratically. One of the sensing stones cracked down the middle with a sharp pop. Weapons were drawn, but Vesta immediately raised a hand. Hold. He's with me. The guards hesitated, sweating. One braver than the rest stepped forward. Sir, he's not suppressing his presence. We can feel it. It's monstrous. Vesta turned to Madara, pointing accusingly. You can suppress it. You're just refusing. Madara didn't deny it. Instead, he took a step forward and the pressure intensified. A few guards dropped their weapons and stumbled back. You should be thankful, Madara said coolly, gaze flicking toward Vesta. This is me being merciful. Kaijin groaned and rubbed his forehead. Just get your envoy before you end up dismantling this place. Madara walked forward into the prison depths. The air bent faintly around him, a side effect of his fused essence. Deeper inside, in the damp confines of the prison cells, Ranga stirred. His fur stood on end, the once sleeping direwolf now fully awake. He sniffed the air, ears twitching. He's here, Ranga whispered to Gobta, who jumped to his feet. Lord Madara. Gobta squeaked. We're saved. Moments later, footsteps echoed. Madara stepped into view. The guards opened the cell without a word. No one dared stop him. He knelt and placed a hand on Ranga's head, then looked to Gobta. You're late, he said. Gobta bowed repeatedly. Sorry. We were ambushed, then arrested, then. You're fine now. Come. We're going home. Madara walked alongside Kaijin through the stone-lined corridors of the prison, flanked by startled guards and confused adventurers. The atmosphere crackled with tension though not a single blow had been exchanged. The sheer pressure of Madara's presence had nearly turned the prison into a battlefield. Inside, Ranga and Gobta had already been released from their cells after the necessary clearance was granted, though not without considerable debate. Their reunion was brief. Madara merely nodded, and Ranga immediately fell in step behind him. Gobta, wide-eyed and babbling, had to be yanked forward by the scruff of his tunic. Outside the gates, Vesta was waiting. He crossed his arms as Madara and his reclaimed envoy stepped into the open air. Though Vesta's face wore the mask of calm professionalism, his clenched jaw betrayed his inner frustration. His Majesty wishes to speak with you directly, Vesta said stiffly, avoiding eye contact with Madara. Follow me. Madara raised an eyebrow, then gave a subtle nod. With Kaijin, Ranga, and Gobta trailing behind, Madara followed Vesta through the winding, fortress-like architecture of Dwargan's central district. As they passed bustling courtyards and towering stone halls, whispers followed them like a wave. The whispers of a man who made the ground shiver and the air tremble. Kaijin leaned into Madara and muttered, "If the king himself wants to meet you, that means you've really stirred the nest. Be careful. Gazel's not someone you want as an enemy. But if you can win his favor, things might get easier." Madara didn't respond at first, his eyes half-lidded with thought. Then he said simply, "I don't care for politics. But I do value power." Kaijin chuckled. "Then you and Gazel might get along better than you think." They continued on in silence, until the towering marble and stone palace loomed into view. The meeting with King Gazel awaited. The heavy stone doors of the royal chamber creaked open as Vesta marched ahead, stiff-backed, his tension palpable. Behind him walked Madara, flanked by Kaijin on one side and the silent, obedient forms of Gobta and Ranga on the other. The throne room of Dwargan was carved from ancient bedrock, bathed in the glow of enchanted torches and glowing minerals embedded in the walls. Dwarven guards stood at attention, their faces strained with an instinctive caution. At the far end, seated on a high dais adorned with gold filigree and war banners, sat King Gazel Dwargo. Broad-shouldered and clad in ornate dwarven armor, his piercing eyes narrowed as he watched Madara approach. He didn't need to be told who this man was. The aura said everything. The suffocating pressure. The way the magicules in the room responded, submitting, spiraling. Like they feared him. "Your Majesty," Vesta said with a stiff bow, his voice clipped and formal. "This is the one I mentioned. The being from Jura who came to retrieve the monsters from our prison." Gazel stood. His gaze locked with Madara's. "So, you're the reason our alarm stones exploded. I'd ask if you plan to declare war, but you don't seem the type to bother with formalities." Madara's crimson eyes glinted with faint amusement. "If I wanted war, this kingdom would already be ash beneath your feet." The room fell into silence. Some guards tightened their grips on their weapons. Vesta twitched, clearly about to interject, but Gazel raised a hand. He studied Madara for a long moment before speaking again. "Fair. And I don't doubt that." The dwarf king descended the stairs, step by heavy step, until he stood a few feet from Madara. He was shorter, but not once did he shrink in presence. "So, who are you? What are you?" Madara's voice was calm but carried weight. "I am Madara Uchiha. I lead a growing settlement in the Jura forest. What I am is of no concern to those who do not threaten me." Gazel chuckled dryly. Cryptic. Convenient. Kaijin stepped forward, trying to diffuse the tension. "Your Majesty, he's not hostile. He just wants to collect his men and return to his people. He even commissioned me for a weapon and plans to purchase goods and services. I believe this is more opportunity than threat." Vesta scoffed under his breath. "You weren't the one he hypnotized into paying for enchanted clothing." Madara smirked but said nothing. Gazel turned back to Madara. "You're strong. Clearly. But strength alone doesn't grant you free reign in another's land. You want to build a village. Fine. But I won't have a walking calamity upsetting the balance of my kingdom." "I didn't come for your blessing," Madara replied. "But I will offer respect so long as it is mutual." The two stared at each other. The air crackled between them like two storms threatening to clash. Then, Gazel gave a nod. "I'll allow it. Kaijin speaks for you while you're in Dwargan. And if you have business that involves us, you bring it to me through proper channels." "Very well," Madara said. As the tension slowly bled from the room, Ranga stepped forward and bowed his head. "Your Majesty. Thank you for sparing us." Gazel gave him a small nod of acknowledgement before turning back to Vesta. "You'll assist them. Ensure their remaining time here is productive, not disruptive." Vesta's jaw clenched, but he bowed. "Yes, my king." Gazel glanced at Madara one final time. "You've stirred the waters, stranger. See to it that you don't flood the land." With that, the meeting ended. Madara turned, his cloak swirling behind him as he departed with Kaijin and his envoy, already thinking of the weapon that awaited him and the coming war that no one saw yet. As the group stepped out of the palace gates, the golden dwarven banners fluttering gently behind them, Madara exhaled in quiet relief. The air of formality always felt constrictive. He turned to Kaijin and Vesta, still trailing slightly behind him. I require a bed, Madara said plainly. And a bath. I won't be leaving until tomorrow. Kaijin gave a sharp nod. There's a decent inn not far from here. Nothing too fancy, but it'll give you some privacy. They've got decent food and warm water too. Vesta sighed through his nose. Just keep your aura in check, he muttered, arms crossed. You're scaring the city half to death. I'll try not to breathe too menacingly, Madara replied flatly, already walking. The inn they arrived at was cozy enough, dwarven stonework with thick wooden beams, warm lanterns, and the muffled sound of music and laughter coming from the attached tavern. A carved wooden sign above the door read the Copper Basin. Inside, the front desk was manned by a hunched old dwarf with a scraggly gray beard, bushy brows, and wide, unfocused eyes. His uniform was crooked and his name tag hung upside down. He was muttering to himself and staring intensely at a broom leaning against the wall. Excuse me, Madara said. The old dwarf didn't move. Kaijin cleared his throat. Old Delmar, we need a room. The dwarf turned very slowly. Huh. Who's talking? Is it you again, Broomilda? Madara blinked. He's speaking to a broom. It's a whole thing, Kaijin muttered apologetically. I knew you'd come back for my beard, you heartless wench. Delmar snarled at the broom, shaking a gnarled fist. You won't catch me off guard this time. Delmar. Kaijin snapped. The old man startled, finally noticing the group. His eyes locked on Madara, and for a moment he looked genuinely frightened. Then his expression softened into a toothless grin. Well, I'll be a tall one, aren't ya? Delmar chuckled. You look like that one guy from the old bard stories. What was his name? Beldora. Close enough, Madara muttered. We need a single room, Kaijin said. Tonight only. Oh, say no more. Delmar said, fumbling under the desk. He knocked over a bowl of keys, then reached past it to grab a piece of bread, held it up victoriously, and started gnawing on it. Then he stopped. Wait, this isn't a key. Madara's eyelid twitched. Finally, after a full 3 minutes of struggle, Delmar handed Madara the right key. Rooms upstairs, third on the left. Might be haunted by a laundry spirit. Or was it a cheese sprite? Thank you, Madara said flatly, already moving. As he reached the top of the stairs, Vesta muttered from behind, I envy the laundry spirit. Madara entered the room and shut the door behind him. The space was simple stone walls, a decently sized bed, and a wooden basin with fresh water. He finally let out a breath, loosened his shoulder wrappings, and approached the wash basin. He hadn't realized how long it had been since he last felt truly clean. Tomorrow, he would leave this kingdom. But tonight, he had a bed and no screaming cultists, sobbing generals, or deranged broom-obsessed dwarves. That, at least, was a kind of victory. The morning after his arrival in Dwargan, Madara rose early. His sleep had been unbothered, but he knew there was work to do, work on himself. As the golden glow of the underground daylight crystals filtered through the window, he sat cross-legged on the wooden floor of his inn room, shirtless, eyes closed, aura already beginning to seep through the walls. I have control, he muttered, exhaling slowly. I've always had control. Inside his mind, Hagoromo's voice echoed. Control is not the same as balance, Madara. And balance is not submission, Asura added. Don't lecture him like a monk, Asura, Indra said, tone dry. Though he's about as subtle as a tailed beast in heat. Madara twitched slightly but focused his breathing. Enough. For 5 long hours from late morning until afternoon Madara sat unmoving, listening to the rhythm of the city, the pulse of the mana-rich stone, and the whispering harmonies of chakra and magicules flowing in tandem through his body while in a deep meditation. At last, as the shadow under the table shifted with the time, he opened his eyes. His aura, still a storm, was no longer a typhoon. People could approach without their knees buckling or the extreme feeling of sickness overwhelming them. His aura, while still giving of power, was no longer suffocating to people. Satisfied for now, Madara stepped into the tavern lobby, quietly drawing the attention of those present. Without his suffocating aura choking the room, the women near the bar took notice. A few whispers followed him as he chose a quiet corner table. By the time he ordered wine and crossed his arms in silence, the bolder ones had already begun moving in. One woman leaned on the table, showing more skin than necessary. You're a quiet one, aren't you? Mind if we keep you company? A second draped herself on his right side, her perfume flowery and thick. Never seen someone so brooding look so good. Madara eyes slightly widened at the random approached. The third simply sat on his lap, making herself comfortable before he could even finish. Inside his head, Hagoromo chuckled. It seems you're popular. Asura whistled. Damn, they're fast. Madara resisted the urge to scowl as he tried to make the women leave, but they wouldn't have Mo for an answer. After a while Madara realized the only way to move them is with force, so he finally let the matter drop. Madara sipped his wine, silently cursing both the attention and the peanut gallery in his head. Hours passed. Gobta was dancing wildly on a table. Ranga sat obediently by the bar, ignoring everything. Madara looked on as he began to feel second-hand embarrassment from Gobta's actions. At last, the door opened with a creak. Kaijin strode in, followed by Vesta and 3 dwarves, all broad-shouldered, all staring in disbelief. Madara. Kaijin blinked, looking at the 2 women clinging to him and the third twirling his hair. You, made friends. Not by choice, Madara muttered. Vesta scoffed. Of course he would attract the city's vixens. Kaijin shook his head, then reached into a wrapped bundle and carefully set it on the table before Madara. Your weapon. Madara stood, the women scattering as he unwrapped the package. It was a masterpiece. The new gunbai was crafted from a polished, obsidian-darkened slab of god tree-enhanced wood, veined with threads of metallic silver infused from melted-down Rinnegan rods. Its fan shape was sharp, yet regal. The Uchiha crest blazed boldly in crimson lacquer at its center. The handle was bound in dark leather, the base capped with dwarven steel etched with rune-like inlays to direct magical flow. It can absorb magicules, redirect them, and it'll use stored magicules to regenerate itself, so it's always in peak condition, Kaijin said proudly. Madara gave a rare nod. This is a magnificent piece of craftsmanship. It may even outdo the original. Kaijin sat down and raised a fist to the waiter. This one's on me. Get everyone at this table some bottles. The dwarves joined him, and soon drinks were flowing. Around the table, conversations turned serious. Kaijin leaned forward, setting down his tankard. So tell me, Madara. Why Jura? That place is crawling with monsters. Not exactly the safest real estate, you know. Madara met his gaze, swirling his wine. Safety was never a concern of mine, he said smoothly. The forest is rich with life and magicules. A raw and untamed land that lacks order and vision. But, with structure, with leadership, it can become something legendary. Garm raised a brow. Legendary. You're planning to build a monster capital in that wilderness. Madara nodded. Yes. A place where races can thrive, not by suppressing their strength, but by learning how to wield it. A society that welcomes discipline, power, and purpose. Kaido scratched his chin. So, you're really trying to build an entire kingdom of monsters. Madara's lips twitched into a faint smile. Not just monsters. People. Creatures who've been labeled beasts simply because no one ever gave them the chance to grow. But under my leadership, they will. Vesta scoffed from across the table. Idealistic nonsense. You're recruiting chaos and pretending it's order. What's to stop them from turning on you the moment they grow too bold? Madara didn't even look his way. Fear doesn't rule them. Respect does. Kaijin studied him, then asked, so what are you, then? You look human, but you feel like something else entirely. Madara held his gaze. I am what the world made me. Born as a simple man, yes. But I've become something more. Let's just say, I am a man who carries something inhuman, and a vision far greater than my own existence. The brothers exchanged glances. Vesta opened his mouth to protest again, but Madara cut him off. You've all served loyally under a king who never let you spread your wings, Madara said, eyes narrowing. What do you truly want? More years spent toiling for scraps of recognition? Or to build something eternal, something that your descendants will remember? Garm's eyes lit up. You'd let us build freely. Design the infrastructure. Not just let you, Madara said. I need you. Your skill. Your imagination. Bring it to Jura. Help me shape a sanctuary where strength and discipline thrive, and you'll never be overlooked again. Kaijin leaned back, looking at his brothers. They all gave small nods. I swore I was done with politics, Kaijin muttered, then downed the rest of his drink. But building something from scratch, with full creative freedom. Madara extended his hand, his Rinnegan shimmering faintly behind his lids. Then swear it. Serve beside me. Not as subordinates, but as the architects of an empire. Kaijin took his hand with a firm grip. You've got a deal, Lord Madara. Vesta looked on in horror as the 4 finest craftsmen in Dworgen pledged themselves to a monster king. And so, the first pillars of Madara's empire were laid. With a silver tongue, he just secured the infrastructure of his new budding kingdom. The air was crisp in the wilderness surrounding the outer fringes of the Jura forest, the midday sun hanging above like a silent sentinel. A lone woman stood atop a small ridge overlooking the forest's edge. Her raven black hair, tinged with streaks of fading crimson, drifted softly in the breeze. A half-mask ivory with demonic contours covered the lower half of her face. Her name was Shizu Izawa, though to many she was known simply as Shizu, the fabled conqueror of flames. She wore a sleek black leather tunic reinforced with light enchanted plating and belts across her waist that held her short sword and various pouches. Her deep brown eyes were sharp, thoughtful, but carried a profound melancholy beneath their surface. From her back, the unmistakable flow of magicals betrayed a hidden might strong enough to make novice adventurers cower, yet gentle in its restraint. Shizu crouched low and pressed her gloved hand to the earth, sensing. Feeling. She had been tracking a magical disturbance for days now, an impossible phenomenon. The storm dragon Veldora, sealed for centuries, had suddenly vanished. Without a trace. Gone, she whispered to herself. But not destroyed. What disturbed her more was what had come next. Just as Veldora's presence disappeared, something far more terrifying bloomed across the forest, a presence so heavy, so otherworldly, that it shook even her soul. It wasn't raw power alone, it was pressure, clarity, and ancient wrath braided into a single pulse. But just as quickly as it had come, it had disappeared as though swallowed by the earth itself. Shizu straightened slowly, eyes narrowing as she looked toward the horizon where the sun dipped over the vast green canopy of Jura. Who, or what could mask such power so effectively? She was not afraid, not exactly, but she had not felt this uncertain since the day she was summoned. Her gaze was fixed on the horizon, on the faint, unnatural pulse in the air that only those deeply attuned to magicals would notice. He's not human. Whatever is waiting in Jura, it's more than just a monster. This pressure. It doesn't come from hunger or rage. It feels cold, calculated, powerful. Her fingers twitched instinctively, a flicker of flame briefly dancing between them before vanishing. A habit she hadn't outgrown, even after decades. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. She turned quickly, hand already reaching for her sword only to see an unfamiliar face. Oi, lady, came a voice, sharp and informal. You shouldn't be standing out here alone, especially not this close to Jura. Don't you know how dangerous it is out here? Shizu turned her head just enough to see them, 3 adventurers walking with practiced caution. The speaker was a young man with a confident swagger. Caval. Beside him was a calm, slender elven woman, Ellen, with her staff casually strapped to her back. Trailing behind was a smaller figure, Guido, his eyes darting to every rustling bush. Caval gave her a quick look over. You a traveler? A merchant? You don't seem the adventurer type, standing there like a ghost. I'm passing through, Shizu replied, her voice calm but firm. Well, you picked a poor time for sightseeing, Guido chimed in, glancing nervously toward the distant forest. Monsters have been getting bold lately. Some even say the storm dragon's aura vanished. Ellen narrowed her eyes slightly. Wait, you're not just anyone, are you? I'm not from any guild, Shizu admitted. But I've dealt with monsters before. Caval crossed his arms, studying her. So you are an adventurer. Quote. Something like that, she said cryptically. I felt something coming from Jura. An unnatural pressure. That's why I'm here. You felt it too, Ellen said, her expression tightening. Even the guild's mages were alarmed. They said it wasn't just that Veldora's energy disappeared, it was replaced by something else. Something darker. Shizu nodded slowly. I felt it too. Something or someone was there. A power I've never sensed before. Cold and ancient. But not evil. At least, not yet. It's weird though, Ellen said, tapping her chin. That pressure, it was overwhelming. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. But then it vanished. Shizu crossed her arms, her voice thoughtful. It didn't vanish. It was reined in. Someone with that much power would never simply flicker out of existence. They're hiding it now. And hiding it well. A tense silence passed between them. So, Guido eventually said, this sucks, but I guess we'll head to Jura now, so see ya. Shizu looked up at the distant trees. Whoever or whatever is there may be tied to Veldora's disappearance. If this force can mask themselves completely now, it's only a matter of time before others try to exploit it. I need to know what we're dealing with. The group fell silent for a moment. Even Guido stopped talking. Shizu's eyes darkened as she turned her gaze back to the forest. A presence that reminds me of the flames I once lived through. Of pain. Of loss. Whoever this person is, they're not like the monsters of this world. He's something else. A man. Carrying a storm behind his eyes. I'm going to Jura with you all, she said with finality. I need to confirm something. Caval exchanged a glance with Ellen and Guido. You serious? You know we were sent to scout, not pick fights with high-ranking monsters. I won't slow you down, Shizu replied, already walking. But you'll steal all the danger, Guido muttered, rubbing the back of his head. Or lead it straight to us. She's right, Ellen said thoughtfully. We're heading there anyway. Might as well work together. Caval sighed. All right. But if we get killed by something with horns, glowing eyes, and a floating third one, I'm blaming you, Ellen. I sense you're describing someone in particular. I've seen weird paintings in taverns. As they turned and began their journey toward the depths of Jura, Shizu glanced back once more. That aura, his aura, was gone from the air. But in her chest, she could still feel the faintest thread of its presence pulling her forward. Who are you? She thought. And why do I feel as if the aura I'm sensing truly belongs to a man? Then the kind of life he lived must have been filled with misery. And why do I feel like he's not the enemy, but something far less dangerous? The deeper they traveled, the more the forest seemed to change. What was once a vibrant woodland filled with sounds of birdsong and rustling underbrush had turned silent unnaturally so. No insects. No howls. No flapping of wings. Just trees. And the growing weight of a presence pressing down on them from all directions. Even the wind seemed to avoid this part of the forest. Caval reached for the hilt of his sword. I don't like this. It's like we're being watched. No, Ellen said quietly, eyes scanning the treetops. It's like we're not even worth watching. Guido pulled his cloak tighter around him, ears twitching. The monsters. They've vanished. It's like they've all cleared out. They have, Shizu said. She didn't slow her pace, but her voice was tight. Something stronger than them has already claimed this part of the forest. They're afraid. Caval frowned. Stronger than a whole pack of direwolves. Or ogres. Shizu didn't answer right away. Her hand hovered near her chest, fingers brushing the crystal embedded in her armor. Her gaze shifted toward the dense center of the forest as though she were peering through the trees and into something unseen. I can feel it, she said at last. We're heading toward it. It. Ellen echoed. Shizu closed her eyes briefly. It's not just a magical pressure. It's something more refined. Something forged in combat. Like a warrior's soul that refuses to be forgotten. I've felt magical beasts. I've even faced demon lords. But this. It feels human. No, it feels like a man who's already died. And came back stronger than death itself. We're not just entering a monster's domain, she said. We're entering the domain of a person. They continued in silence for a while, the mood heavy. Eventually, a new scent reached them: charred wood, and faintly, something metallic. Smoke curled upward from between the treetops. The edges of wooden structures began to reveal themselves in the distance. The Goblin Village. Shizu held up her hand, stopping them. The scene before them was a stark contrast to the lifeless forest they'd passed. Despite the simple homes and defensive palisades, the air here hummed with magic. Several goblins bustled around the village center, carrying supplies and rebuilding damaged walls. Direwolves patrolled the perimeter like trained soldiers. There was unity and purpose. Caval exhaled. This place is alive. They were attacked recently, Ellen observed, gesturing to scorched ground near the village's edge. But they're rebuilding quickly. Guido whistled. For goblins, this is insane. They're not supposed to organize like this. And yet they are, Shizu said. Then her eyes narrowed. Far across the clearing, behind a large stone and wood hall near the center of the village, she felt it. A pulse of energy, powerful yet restrained, like a tidal wave frozen mid-crash. It was the same presence she had felt since setting foot in Jura, now clearer than ever. And it was getting closer. She turned her head just slightly, as if looking beyond the village and into the winding forest path behind them. He's returning. He knows we're here. And I'll finally see the source of this pressure face to face. Her grip on her mask tightened. Caval looked at her sideways. What is it now? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she smiled beneath her mask, grim, unreadable. Nothing, she said softly. Just preparing myself. The sun filtered through the canopy of the Jura forest, painting shifting patterns of gold and shadow across the dirt trail. Shizu and her party had been traveling for hours. Though the goblin settlement was not far by map, the magical-rich environment of the forest twisted space and perception alike. Still, the four advanced without much difficulty, at least not physically. Guido, the roguish thief of the group, was the first to break the silence. Still can't believe the guild sent us out here to meet a monster lord. They didn't say monster lord exactly, Caval corrected, his hand resting on the hilt of his longsword. They said, a potential threat, with unusual intelligence and rapidly growing influence. Ellen, her silver hair glowing slightly from her inherent elven magic, gave a skeptical glance to Shizu. And what do you think of all this? You've barely spoken since we entered the forest. Shizu's lips remained sealed, but her eyes were sharp, always scanning. Deep inside, however, she was in turmoil. That presence she had felt a few hours ago, no, she still felt it. Moving. Approaching. Cold and thunderous like a coming storm. It wasn't the same as Veldora's sealed presence, but it rivaled it in intensity. It's him, she finally said. The party paused. Him. Guido raised an eyebrow. The one I came to find, Shizu murmured, her voice almost reverent and tinged with apprehension. He's returning to the center of the forest, just as we are. They exchanged glances but said nothing more. They understood enough. Whoever this was, he wasn't normal. By the time they reached the outskirts of the village, they found a sight that none of them expected. Wooden palisades reinforced with thick tree trunks and crudely applied earth magic surrounded the settlement. Several goblins, visibly larger and more organized than typical forest dwellers, manned the gates with primitive but functional weapons. Behind them were orderly rows of huts and buildings under construction. At the gate stood a tall goblin, his chest puffed out with pride. His features bore dignity unusual for a goblin. Two other guards stepped aside to allow the party approach. Welcome to Lord Madara's village, the goblin said in a clear voice, surprising them with both etiquette and structure. I am Reincarnated, chief of this settlement. State your purpose. Caval stepped forward. We're adventurers from the Free Guild of Bloomond. We were sent to investigate rumors of a rapidly expanding monster village in Jura. But, he looked around. This is far more developed than we were told. Indeed, Reincarnated said with a proud smile. Our Lord is not like other beings. He gave his name's power. Order. You'll find no chaos here, only purpose. Lord Madara. Ellen asked, arching an eyebrow. What kind of monster is he? Reincarnated's smile faltered for the first time. He is beyond such classification. A warrior. A savior. Perhaps something divine, though he denies it. Shizu stood silently, her mask hiding the subtle flicker in her expression. As they spoke, another goblin ran toward the gate, panting heavily. Chief. More goblins from the eastern tribes. They've come, they want to join. Behind him, a procession of ragged, weary goblins, men, women, even children appeared on the trail. Many bore signs of recent attacks or famine. They stood just outside the palisade, some kneeling, others bowing their heads. I see, Reincarnated said solemnly, stepping forward. Caval frowned. This happens often. Increasingly so, Reincarnated admitted. They've heard of what Lord Madara did for us. Many tribes wish to submit and join his protection. We accept them, but their fate will depend on his judgment. What's so different about him? Guido muttered, eyes narrowed. Rhaegar turned to him, his expression unreadable. Everything. Shizue remained quiet, but inside, she felt it closer now. That cold, watching presence. It wasn't hostile, but it was terrifying in its magnitude. She couldn't tell whether it was magicals or something else entirely. Her mask, an enchanted artifact crafted by the Empire, shielded her from detection. She doubted even he would sense her until they stood face to face. The group waited. Goblins tended to the new arrivals. Temporary housing was prepared. Rhaegar had a seat brought out for the adventurers and offered them food and water, which they cautiously accepted. 2 hours passed. And then it finally happened. From the distant trail leading through the forest, a low vibration reached their ears. Like thunder cloaked in silence. A pressure so thick it made Guido almost drop his cup. Ellen's breath caught in her throat. Even Caval's fingers twitched toward his sword. Only Shizue remained still. He's here, she said. At the top of the trail, flanked by several armored dwarves and the 2 missing members of the envoy Gobta and Ranga, stood as a lone figure. The dark obsidian outfit, trimmed with white and tomo. The proud Uchiha fan gleaming like a crest of war. His presence drowned the sounds of the forest around him. Even the birds went silent. Madara Uchiha had returned. The sun crested the treetops, bathing the village in soft golden light. The air buzzed with an undercurrent of anticipation. Goblins from newly arrived clans lined up in neat, if trembling, rows. Their bodies were worn and tattered, yet their eyes shimmered with awe and desperation as they stood before the one who had become more myth than man in mere days, Madara Uchiha. He stood at the head of the village square, arms folded as his cloak rustled gently in the breeze. Kaijin and his brothers observed from the side, their expressions guarded but curious. The adventurers Ellen, Guido, Caval and Shizue lingered nearby, observing closely. Madara's crimson eyes scanned the gathered goblins. Step forward, he said, voice cool and even. If you have come to me for strength, you shall have it. But understand this: your lives now carry the weight of the Uchiha name. Serve with dignity, or fall with shame. The goblins gulped but obeyed without hesitation. One by one, Madara extended his chakra, now harmonized with magicals, to imprint names upon them. Each time, a flash of light consumed the goblin, twisting their form, empowering them. The changes were dramatic. Smaller goblins became well-built warriors or clever craftsmen. A scrawny elder became a wise, sharp-eyed strategist. Children grew overnight into hardy trainees. But Madara never faltered. Dozens became hundreds, and still he stood tall, fingers folding into a brief tiger seal with each name. A faint violet shimmer pulsed behind his eyes every time he uttered a name, yet his expression remained unreadable. Ellen leaned toward Kaijin. How many has he named now? 100. More. Kaijin crossed his arms. Closer to 200, I'd guess. And no sign of fatigue. Guido whistled. Guy's a monster. He's more than that, Shizue murmured behind her mask, unreadable as her gaze never left Madara. When the final goblin knelt and received his name, Madara simply exhaled once, his cloak gently settling back against his body. Without a word, he walked to the open space just beyond the central square and placed a hand on the earth. Wood style. Forest's embrace. From the soil, massive roots twisted up like awakened serpents, curling and intertwining to form rows of structures, walls, roofs, and beams until fully realized homes, tall and pristine, stood in place. In less than 2 minutes, over 100 buildings had sprouted from nothing. The goblins gasped. So did the adventurers. That's not magic, Caval muttered. No, Ellen whispered. It's something else entirely. Shizue's eyes narrowed. He doesn't just reshape the world. He commands it. That evening, the celebration. The feast was unlike anything the goblin village had seen in generations. Great fires roared, roasting wild boar and forest beasts hunted that very day. Barrels of fermented mushroom ale were cracked open. Tables were stacked high with roasted vegetables, seasoned tubers, and a strange glowing blue stew courtesy of a peculiar mushroom species Madara had personally gathered. The adventurers sat close to the fire, each holding tin goblets, plates loaded with sizzling meat. Even Kaijin and his brothers loosened their belts and laughed between bites. The air rang with music and cheering. Rigurd approached Madara with a goblet in hand. Lord Madara, please accept this humble brew in your honor. Madara took the goblet, raised it in brief acknowledgement, and sipped. His face twitched. It's potent. That's how we know it's working. Gobta chimed in, already woozy on his third cup. Shizu, still silent, sat just across the fire from Madara. Her gaze locked with his though he never looked her way directly. She tilted her head, curious. Why can't he sense me? She thought. Is it really just the mask, or is there something deeper? Meanwhile, Kaijin leaned in. Madara. I've been thinking. Your project here, it's more than a village, isn't it? Madara took another sip. What do you think it is? The dwarf scratched his beard. You're building a nation. Madara was quiet for a long moment. Not yet. But perhaps, soon. Ellen stood and crossed the firelight. Lord Madara, she said hesitantly, I still don't understand. Why name monsters? Why give them power? Madara's gaze flicked to her. Because power without purpose leads to rebellion. Loyalty forged through strength lasts longer than fear. Shizu, unseen, smirked faintly beneath her mask. He speaks like a man who's ruled before. Kaijin raised a cup. Then here's to your rule, Madara. May your enemies think twice before stepping foot in Jura. The goblins raised their cups with a resounding cheer. Madara drank, his gaze distant. Unbeknownst to them all, his mind whispered with the voices of Indra, Hagoromo, and Asura, occasionally arguing among themselves about goblin culture, dwarf metallurgy, and whether mushroom ale was sacrilegious filth, or a drink of the gods. Madara quietly sighed. This is my life now. A pungent incense hung in the air, the scent of burning myrrh and decaying roses weaving through the darkened hall. The throne at the end of the chamber loomed high, a twisted blend of bleached bone and black stone, etched with runes only the mad could read. Faint, flickering torches offered the only light in the void-like expanse. Velmira knelt at the base of the throne, her jaw still wrapped in fresh bandages. Despite the injuries, she lowered her head, arms spread in contrition. My lord Siveth, I have failed. A low hum echoed from the throne. Then silence. The sound of footsteps light, measured. And then, the voice, silken, smooth, and dangerous. You did not fail. Velmira looked up, startled as Siveth descended from his throne slowly. The corrupted elf was tall and elegant, but deathly pale, as if moonlight had replaced blood in his veins. His shoulder-length crimson hair gleamed like blood in the torchlight, but his most disturbing feature was his eyes, perfectly white irises, surrounded by rings of golden light eyes that saw everything. I watched the battle myself, he continued, fingers steepled. Azakal and Xantrax perished. Yes. But you survived. Not by fleeing but by fate. Or perhaps, by design. I couldn't land a blow. He struck me once, and I lost all control. I failed to even. Siveth raised a hand. Velmira fell silent. He was beyond our expectations. Beyond yours. But not beyond mine. He moved beside her, brushing her shoulder lightly. The one called Madara. He is not merely a monster. He is something new. I felt it when the ley lines shifted. A cold, domineering force unlike anything born of this world. His aura did not surge. It conquered. He returned to the base of his throne and turned toward the others in the chamber. Let us begin. From the darkness, 9 figures stepped forward. Each wore different robes, masks, or armor, but all bowed in respect. Velmira moved to stand with them number 10, scarred but still breathing. A robed man with a porcelain mask and bone-white staff spoke first. His voice was calm and deep. So our 9th and 11th are dead. And this Madara is no passing threat. Correct, Siveth confirmed. Azakal's strength was immense, and Xantrax's escape spells were thought untouchable. But this Madara rendered them both meaningless. We should destroy him now, growled a woman with blue tribal tattoos and jagged chainblades strapped to her back. General number 4, Karua. I'll gather a unit and... You'll fail, interrupted another general. A tall, serpentine man with multiple black piercings number 3, Soren spoke coldly. Attacking him directly again will only end with more of our blood staining the forest floor. Siveth remained silent, watching them all bicker. Then he lifted one finger and time seemed to pause. His telekinetic pressure flooded the room, forcing every general to their knees. I am not here to debate, he said, his voice now void of warmth. I watched him crush Azakel's ribcage with a construct out of a nightmare. I watched him backhand Velmira through a dimensional gate, and freeze time to halt Xantrax mid-teleport. If I went myself, I would not return unscathed. That sobered the room. After a moment, he released them. The generals slowly rose, more respectful now. So what do we do? Asked General Number 6, a middle-aged dwarf covered in scorched armor named Brador. Let him grow. Sivith smirked. No. We turn the world against him. A globe of glowing energy rose between his hands, displaying the map of the Western nations. His pale fingers danced above it. We manipulate from the shadows. Jura is young. Their alliance is weak. Their image unformed. Let them be seen as monsters and conquerors. He waved a hand over the nation of Falmouth. I have an associate in Falmouth. One of the demon lord Clayman's pawns. He's been engineering a pretense for invasion. We will encourage it. Velmira's eyes widened. We're calling in a favor from a demon lord. Clayman owes me, Sivith replied simply. And he's too obsessed with pulling strings to say no. Falmouth will march. We will slip agents among them. What of Madara? Asked Soren. Sivith turned back toward his throne. We test his patience. Let him think his village thrives. Let him grow attached. And then we raise it all. His white eyes narrowed, golden rings glowing like halos of divine judgment. One way or another, the world will turn against him. And when he breaks we shall see if he can bleed. The clamor of clinking mugs, laughter, and roasted meat slowly dulled to a quiet hum under the moonlit sky. The goblins, adventurers, and dwarves had eaten their fill. Dozens of newly built homes stood as proof of Madara's power, casting long wooden silhouettes in the firelight. Shizu had waited patiently. Hours had passed since Madara arrived with the dwarves and his recovered envoy. She had observed from a distance, content to let the others marvel at him, but her curiosity was a quiet ember that refused to die. She adjusted her mask slightly and stepped away from the resting adventuring trio of Guido, Ellen, and Caval, walking softly through the fading celebration toward the massive bonfire at the village center. Madara stood near it, his cloak drifting gently in the wind, arms folded behind his back as he watched the flames dance in silence. You're not drinking, Shizu said calmly, stopping just short of him. I don't need to, Madara replied, not turning. But the others seemed to be enjoying themselves. Shizu stood beside him now. The flames made his silhouette flicker. There was something ancient in his presence, like standing next to a monolith from a long-dead age. I've been watching you, she said softly. I noticed. Silence fell for a moment, thick but not awkward. You're not from this world, Shizu continued. At least, not originally. Madara finally turned his head slightly, just enough to look at her from the corner of his eye. And neither are you. That mask hides your face, but not your scent or your presence. Shizu hesitated. You could sense me. No, Madara admitted. But now that you stand here, your energy is too disciplined, too controlled. You're not like the others. You're something more. She sat down on a nearby rock, mask tilting upward toward the stars. My name is Shizu Izawa. I was summoned here decades ago, by a man I could never forgive. Madara's gaze lingered. I see. You carry a burden. So do you, she said, looking at him now. I've seen men try to act as you do. Calm, reserved, watching the world from a distance. But there's a sadness in your eyes, and a fury you don't let escape. Madara chuckled just once. You're observant. More than you think. And I've seen your kind before, summoned heroes, displaced souls. Monsters in human skin. Madara's expression hardened for a heartbeat, but Shizu raised a hand. Don't mistake me. I don't think you're a monster. But you are dangerous. He didn't deny it. I've earned that reputation. They stood in silence once more. I came here to see who you were, Shizu continued. To understand the force that replaced Veldora. So you've heard the rumors, Madara said. Let them speak. I did not come to be understood. Then why did you come? He paused, his eyes drifting to the darkened forest beyond the village borders. To live, he said quietly. Maybe for the first time. Shizu didn't expect that. Her posture shifted subtly, no longer tense, but curious. You've been given a second chance too, haven't you? Madara gave a small nod. One I didn't ask for. But perhaps, one I need. The fire crackled. And what will you do with that chance? She asked. Build, he said. Fight when necessary. And if I must, destroy what threatens this peace. Shizu stared at him, thoughtful. There's something coming. I can feel it. And I think, you might be the only one who can stop it. She rose to her feet. I'll be staying for a few days, if that's all right. Madara gave her a glance. Do as you wish. I don't rule with chains. She turned to leave, pausing only once. Thank you, Lord Madara. He said nothing in response. But as she walked away, a single voice echoed in his mind. Indra. Ha. You going soft, old man. Hagoromo. Let him be. He's learning something we never did. Asura. That one, she sees more than she lets on. Careful, brother, she might even tame you. Madara rolled his eyes. You three never shut up. Indra, grinning, and you wouldn't have it any other way. Later that night, long after the village quieted and only a few distant laughs lingered from the outskirts, Madara stood alone by the dying fire. The embers pulsed with heat but were fading fast. Shizu returned, this time without her mask. Her soft, youthful face bore the weight of years far beyond it. Madara turned his head slightly, eyes narrowing just a bit in recognition. So that's your real face. I felt it was only fair, she said, sitting beside him again. You let me see you for who you are, even if only a little. Madara studied her, then turned back to the fire. You were summoned. By someone you hate. Who? Shizu's face darkened. Leon Cromwell. A demon lord. Madara looked sideways. Demon lord. She nodded. They're powerful beings. Some rule nations. Others are puppeteers pulling strings from the shadows. Leon. He summoned me as a child. Gave me Ifrit, the spirit sealed inside me. He turned me into a weapon. Madara's jaw clenched. I know the type. I escaped, Shizu continued. Eventually. But Ifrit stayed. And Leon, he's still out there. Madara's voice lowered. You want revenge? Shizu paused. No. Not revenge. Closure. Madara nodded slowly. If I ever meet this Leon, I'll judge him with my own eyes. Be careful, she warned. Some of the demon lords, they're on a different level. Even I don't know all their names. But I've seen their strength. Strength can be overcome, Madara said. No matter how absolute it seems. Shizu tilted her head. Even yours. Madara gave the faintest smirk. I've already died more than once if that answers your question. Those experiences now make me even more careful. They sat in silence again, side by side under the stars. Whatever came next, this conversation, this alliance, this shared understanding, it would be a ripple in the story of the world. And perhaps, the beginning of something more. The goblin village had calmed, with the sounds of jovial conversation still echoing from the feast hall. Gobta and Rigir mingled with the other goblins, making merry while Madara lingered in quiet reflection. Shizu, on the other hand, had become quieter as the night wore on. She sat at the far edge of the table, her hand gently resting against her chest, her face clouded. Despite the warm firelight and the comforting presence of those around her, there was something uneasy in her expression. She had been fighting this illness for years since her time under Leon's control, but this was different. This wasn't just the quiet ache of exhaustion she was used to, this was something deeper, something pulling at her from within. Her breath hitched as she placed a hand over her heart, feeling the internal flames of Ifrit stir, almost waking from its slumber. She felt the fire surge, hot and restless, just beneath her skin. The warm glow of the fire flickered in her eyes for a moment, as if the flames inside were beginning to burn brighter. Madara, who had been silently observing the festivities, noticed the sudden change in her demeanor. His gaze sharpened as he sensed the subtle shift in her energy, his Rinnegan glowing faintly. Shizu, he said, his tone quiet but commanding. He didn't need to ask, he could feel the tension in her. Her gaze slowly lifted to meet his, and there was a fleeting moment of recognition. She smiled weakly, but her eyes betrayed the fear she had been holding back. It's nothing, Madara, she replied softly. Just a little tired, I suppose. Madara didn't believe her. He had lived through more battles and wars than anyone could count, and he knew when someone was lying to themselves. He stood up, walking toward her with purposeful steps. You're lying. I can feel it. Shizu shifted uncomfortably, the sensation growing stronger. It's just the mask. The weight of it all, she muttered, avoiding his gaze. But Madara's eyes were on her now, penetrating deep, seeing past the falsehoods. He knew she was hiding something, but more than that he knew that whatever it was no longer something she could control. As he got closer, he could almost feel the heat radiating from her skin. A sudden, sharp pain shot through Shizu's chest, and she gasped, clutching at her heart. Shizu. Madara moved closer, his expression now stern. Tell me what's happening to you. The intensity of the pain intensified, and the fire within her burned brighter. She gasped again, the flames in her eyes flickering to life like a wildfire, consuming her. I can't hold it back any longer, Shizu whispered, her voice breaking. Ifrit. It's awakening. Madara froze, his eyes narrowing. So it was finally happening. The spirit she had contained for so long was slipping its leash. Why didn't you tell me? Madara demanded, his voice low, but with an edge of concern. He had seen this before, spirits breaking free, uncontrolled, causing devastation. Ifrit's power was immense, dangerous even to someone like Madara. I didn't want to bring it upon you, Shizu said, her breathing becoming labored. I wanted to fight it. But it's too strong now. I can't stop it. Before Madara could say another word, Shizu's body spasmed, the heat in her chest becoming unbearable. Her hands clenched into fists as the fire erupted from within her, a violent surge of energy. Her aura began to fluctuate wildly, a chaotic blaze of heat and light. Madara stepped back slightly, his Sharingan flickering as he assessed the situation. This was dangerous. More than just dangerous, it was a ticking time bomb. Madara. Shizu's voice was strained, almost pleading. Please, stop me before it consumes everything. Without a moment's hesitation, Madara stepped forward, his hand outstretched. But the moment his fingers brushed against her shoulder, an immense pressure erupted from Shizu's body, and the flames of Ifrit tore free. A spiral of cinders erupted from the collapsed form of Shizu as Ifrit burst free, the ground cracking beneath her limp body from the sheer heat. Flames shot skyward like pillars, twisting unnaturally as the summoned spirit's monstrous form emerged, his molten eyes locking instantly onto Madara. Madara's own eyes narrowed. He stepped forward slowly, the air around him shimmering with residual heat. Shizu's body lay unconscious but intact behind him. So you're the one who's caused her so much torment, Madara murmured, his voice sharp with disdain. Ifrit roared, and the very ground trembled. Without hesitation, Madara blurred forward, a gust of wind trailing his movement. His fists clenched as he launched the first strike, an arcing punch toward Ifrit's face. The flaming spirit's eyes tracked him. Before the strike could land, a geyser of flame erupted from its torso, forcing Madara to abandon the assault mid-motion and twist through the air, narrowly avoiding the inferno. Landing lightly, Madara's Sharingan spun. It can see me. Not fully, but enough to react. The battle shifted into a game of calculated pressure. Madara attacked in hit-and-run bursts, flickering around the battlefield with bursts of high-speed taijutsu. He landed precise blows along Ifrit's ribcage and legs, but none were crippling. The spirit was built for endurance, its body absorbing the impacts like a wall of magma. Ifrit countered by sweeping arcs of hellfire, spinning like a burning tornado. Several trees surrounding the battlefield ignited instantly. Madara weaved between the flames, his movements fluid but cautious. Damn thing's persistent, he muttered. Then Ifrit roared again, mouth opening wide to unleash a jet of concentrated fire. Madara stood his ground. Kaiten. Goka Mekyaku. A vast wall of blue flame surged from Madara's mouth, slamming against Ifrit's jet of fire. The two infernos collided violently, sending shockwaves rippling through the forest. The flame clash became a tug of war. Madara narrowed his eyes, increasing the pressure. Behind him, Rigurd watched from the edge of the village with the adventurers. Those flames. They're not normal. Our village would be gone 10 times over if either of them aimed this way, the goblin chief muttered. Guido whistled. That monster's still standing against that guy. Caval grit his teeth. Ifrit is one of the strongest fire spirits known. But still. This man, Madara, he's overwhelming him. Ellen couldn't take her eyes off Madara. He's terrifying. But also, beautiful, like a storm. Back on the battlefield, Madara took advantage of a slip in Ifrit's footing. He leapt high, launching himself into a spinning heel kick that collided with the side of Ifrit's skull. The blow sent molten fragments scattering from the spirit's face, but it recovered instantly and retaliated with a wide flame burst that engulfed Madara. Smoke and ash obscured the sky. Then, from within the blaze black flames erupted. Madara's silhouette became visible, cloaked in flickering shadows. The Amaterasu had ignited across Ifrit's chest. The spirit screamed as the cursed flames clung to its body, resisting all attempts to extinguish them. Ifrit tried to hurl itself into a pond, but Madara appeared again, kicking it square in the gut and sending it crashing through several trees. These flames burn whatever the caster sees, Madara said coldly. Not even spirits are exempt going by your groveling. Madara narrowed his eyes as the fire spirit roared in defiance, a pillar of flames spiraling around its molten body. Then, without a word, Madara focusing his chakra, his eternal Mangekyo Sharingan spinning ominously in the dim glow of firelight. Amaterasu. In the same breath, black flames bloomed mid-air, streaking toward Ifrit like a spear of divine wrath. The cursed fire struck center mass, slamming directly into Ifrit's massive chest and spreading hungrily across his core. The air itself hissed in protest as the black blaze dug in, gnawing through flame and magic alike. The fire spirit howled, lurching backward, its core flickering as the eternal flame seared into it. Kaijin stood frozen. It's burning a fire spirit. Those flames aren't normal, Ranga growled, one paw forward, protective. Even Shizu, whose face was hidden behind her mask, gave a subtle reaction. Her visible eye widened not in fear, but in realization. Ifrit didn't waste time panicking. With an enraged shriek, he stomped the ground, summoning a cyclonic barrier of flame around himself. He began to spin, the vortex amplifying, creating vacuum-like force. Then surprisingly he expelled the black flames off his body, displacing Amaterasu using nothing but the force of elemental rotation and mastery over fire. The cursed flames hit the stone floor and clung there, still alive, but no longer on him. Madara smiled with thinly veiled lust for battle. So, you aren't a mindless beast. You adapt. You can think quickly on the spot. Perhaps you'll be a dance worth remembering. The spirit, still smoldering, suddenly restructured its tactics. Instead of brute aggression, Ifrit launched a series of wide, sweeping arcs of flame across the battlefield. Walls of fire jutted up like serpents twisting and writhing to cut off every viable path to approach. Flames exploded upward in seemingly random intervals, denying space itself to Madara. HMPH, Madara exhaled with an amused tone, weaving between collapsing fire pillars. He attempted to move in once then again and each time, a sudden blast of fire would preempt his path, forcing him to abandon his trajectory. Using area denial, are we? Madara murmured with a faint grin. Trying to take away my speed advantage, clever. He dropped low, fingers flashing through hand signs. Water style. Liquid bullet barrage. From his mouth, 6 compressed bullets of water launched at blinding speed, 2 aimed for Ifrit directly, the others meant to tear through the fire-lined terrain. Ifrit's eyes glowed fiercely as he retaliated with a spiral inferno cannon, intercepting the water bullets in midair. Steam exploded outward in a blinding haze. And that's when Madara vanished into it. The next instant, a dull crack echoed as Madara's foot connected with Ifrit's chest, followed by a brutal elbow to the side of the head, then a twisting palm strike to the throat, and finally a rising knee that staggered the spirit. 4 hits quick, precise, and devastating. As Ifrit stumbled back, Madara's palm opened. A chakra rod protruded like a black spike of judgment, aimed directly for Ifrit's chest. But Ifrit screamed and detonated his body in a burst of flame again, this time, more intense, more personal. The explosion swallowed Madara briefly. Ranga's ears flattened. Master. Shizu's hands clenched at her side. As the smoke cleared, Madara stood in the aftermath, cloak scorched at the edges, steam rising from his shoulders. He exhaled, and chuckled softly. Hey, I felt that, he murmured, voice low and satisfied. Maybe this world won't be boring after all. Then, with a smooth motion, Madara unhooked the gunbai from his back. The weapon, massive and imposing, reflected the flames in its curved obsidian surface. Enchanted with Kaijin's finest rune work and bound to Madara's will, the gunbai shimmered faintly, reacting to the heat. Ifrit didn't hesitate. He launched a continuous stream of fire, trying to smother Madara completely. But Madara, with casual grace, swept his gunbai forward. The flames struck the fan and were redirected midair, curved around Madara's body and flung to the side. The gunbai didn't just defend, it controlled the flow of magic like a dam redirecting a river. Another blast came. Madara flipped the fan with a backhand sweep, and again, the fire danced away as if obeying his command. Kaijin leaned over to Ellen, whispering hoarsely. That's not just a fan. It's like a wall, a weaponized shield. He's not just resisting Ifrit, Kaval said, stunned. He's playing with him. Madara stepped forward with measured confidence. He batted away another fireball, the gunbai humming with built-up pressure. Then he pivoted, spinning on one foot, and delivered a wide, arcing swing of the weapon. The sheer force of the motion carved a howling massive tornado into existence. Wind shrieked through the battlefield as fire was vacuumed up and extinguished. The ground trembled. The sky above seemed to bend under the pressure. Gobta yelped, clinging to Ranga's tail. He just made a tornado with a fan. Ranga growled in admiration. No, that's not a normal war fan. That's a Reaper's instrument. Madara stood in the eye of the still churning storm, gunbai poised over his shoulder like a blade. Ifrit skidded backward, caught between awe and fury. Its form trembled, flickering between cohesion and combustion. The tide of the battle was shifting again and Madara Uchiha was only getting warmed up. The tornado Madara unleashed had finally begun to settle, fire displaced, and air twisted into silence. But Ifrit wasn't done. Not quite yet. A guttural roar erupted from the flaming spirit's core, its body swelling with wild, no longer contained rage. Its normally flickering flame skin became opaque and incandescent, bordering on white-hot. Ranga tensed. He's going to detonate. Kaijin's jaw tightened. No, he's amplifying himself. With a sharp, enraged howl, Ifrit surged, erupting into a corona of radiant flame. An omnidirectional tidal wave of fire exploded outward, vaporizing trees, rock, and the dirt beneath him. The battlefield lit up like a sun had been born at ground level. Madara's eyes flicked wide. He snapped his hands together. Earth-style. Mud wall. He slammed his palms into the ground, raising a thick barricade of stone in front of the goblins, dwarves, and adventurers. But he was too late to shield himself fully. The explosion consumed him in a wave of molten flame. Master. Ranga howled, leaping forward before being stopped by the heat alone. Shizu instinctively reached out, trembling. No. The world went silent. And then. TCH. The blast's remnants peeled back like smoke torn apart by the wind. A massive, blue skeletal arm swept outward, dispelling the burning fog like a titan swatting away clouds. The sound of sinew forming echoed, metal grating over bone as the giant, ethereal skeletal Susanoo took shape, towering above the battlefield with eerie majesty. Madara stood at its heart, eyes gleaming like twin blood moons. His presence had changed. He no longer bothered concealing anything. The full brunt of his aura erupted outward, no longer dulled, and the effects were immediate. Every goblin fell to one knee. Even the wolves whimpered and bowed their heads low. Shizu's breathing hitched, her knees trembling behind her mask. This pressure. It's divine. Kaval fell back a step. What is he? Ellen was pale, sweating. I think I'm going to be sick. Gobta tried to scream but only let out a wheeze as he toppled over like a fainting goat. Ranga bowed deeply. We are in the presence of a god. Even Ifrit, though barely capable of true fear, stumbled backward. Its fire surged once more in desperation. It bellowed and unleashed a beam of pure fire, hotter than anything yet conjured, directly at the chest of the Susanoo. The flames licked at the glowing ribcage but it didn't burn. Madara didn't stop walking. One step at a time, Madara marched forward, shoulders squared, arms lowered. The fire continued, Ifrit pouring every ounce of its spiritual essence into the blast. Trees nearby burst into flame, even the air shimmered with heat distortion, but the Susanoo's chest remained unmarred. And still, Madara walked. Is that all? He murmured, barely audible. Let me show you. A fraction of true power. The divine power of Madara Uchiha. The Susanoo's arm lifted. A glowing Yasaka Magatama, spinning violently like a planetary chain of destruction, manifested in the palm. It shot forward, spinning at terrifying speed, and hit Ifrit like a meteor. The blast sent the spirit flying dozens of meters, tearing a gaping gash straight into its core. For the first time, Ifrit dropped to one knee, panting, its ethereal body destabilizing as jugs of blood poured out of him. Kaijin's eyes went wide. He tore a hole through a spirit. Shizu gripped her mask. He can kill it, she whispered. Madara didn't wait. He extended one hand. Bansho Tenon. Universal pull. Ifrit, still reeling, was ripped forward at blinding speed, dragged helplessly toward the waiting hand of a god. The Susanoo cocked back, its other arm tightening and contracting with ungodly force. Madara's voice dropped to a whisper. Be gone. Then the skeletal titan's fist dropped like a divine judgment, crashing down on Ifrit with enough force to shatter the earth. The ground cratered violently before sinking in on itself, smoke and flame bursting upward like a volcanic eruption. The ground shook violently underfoot. The crater was vast, scorched, and blackened, steam rising from its edges. And in the center of it, nothing remained. Ifrit had been crushed, no, obliterated. Pulverized under the full might of Madara's skeletal Susanoo. The flames died with him. The fire was gone. Only the quiet howling wind remained. Silence reigned. And then, incredible, Shizu whispered as she lay on the ground unmoving. Kaijin simply stared in awe. That wasn't just power. That was precision. He could have killed us all in that swing, and didn't. Ranga dipped his head low. Truly, there is no master like mine. Madara dismissed the Susanoo with a thought, the skeletal frame fading to blue mist behind him. He turned and walked toward Shizu without a word. His expression was unreadable. But his stride was steady. The monster who had entered this world with nothing but a new chance had just proven to the heavens that he was more than just a man. He was Madara Uchiha. And even spirits could not stand against his undeniable might. The crater still smoked from the Susanoo's final punch, a deep bowl of scorched earth that whispered of divine wrath. Silence clung to the village like a fog, thick, suffocating, and absolute. No one spoke. No one dared. The goblins stared wide-eyed, their spears clattering to the ground in awe. Some dropped to their knees and pressed their foreheads to the dirt. The dwarf brothers exchanged looks of sheer disbelief, their proud warrior blood chilled by what they'd just witnessed. Even Kaijin, seasoned craftsman and veteran, felt his legs weaken. That wasn't magic, he murmured. That was something else. The adventuring trio Guido, Caval, and Ellen stood frozen. Ellen trembled, gripping her staff with both hands. Did that skeletal giant come from him? She whispered. Caval swallowed hard. That thing swatted Ifrit like he was nothing. And he didn't even use his full strength. Is this what a god looks like? Guido added, his voice barely above a whisper. At the center of it all, Madara stood as the wind swept the battlefield clean. The ashes of Ifrit drifted away like snowflakes. His eyes narrowed as he approached the fallen figure near the crater's edge. Shizu. Her fragile body lay limp, her breathing shallow, barely holding on. Her mask was cracked, her body trembling as the last remnants of Ifrit's fire faded from her flesh. Madara knelt silently beside her, then, without a word, scooped her up into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, like a dying ember trying to hold on. He strode past the stunned crowd, his presence parting them like water around a boulder. No one dared interfere. He carried her into the nearest constructed house, one of the freshly built homes he'd formed earlier using wood style, and laid her carefully on a bed made of softened moss and warm cloth. Kneeling beside her, Madara placed his hands gently over her chest and began to channel his chakra. Mystic palm technique. A green glow surrounded his hands. He searched for wounds, internal ruptures, anything he could repair, but it was no use. Her spirit was fading. The damage wasn't physical. It was the slow death of a soul long in torment. Madara's eyes darkened. He activated his Rinnegan. King of Hell, he thought, preparing to summon the spectral maw of salvation. But before he could will it forth, Shizu's hand weakly clasped his wrist. Don't, she whispered. Madara paused. You'll die if I don't do anything. I know, she said, smiling faintly. And that's okay. He stared at her, stone-faced, but behind those eyes churned something deeper. She looked up at the ceiling, her breaths growing shallower. This world has always felt like a dream I couldn't wake up from. Ever since that day, when he summoned me. Leon, Madara muttered. She nodded. He saved me from a dying earth, but he also imprisoned me. Made me into a vessel. Told me I was chosen, but never asked if I wanted to be. A tear welled in the corner of her eye. I carried Ifrit inside me for so long, I don't know where he ended and I began. The flames they whispered all the time. Burn them. Destroy them. Obey. And I did, even when I didn't want to. Madara clenched his fists. He used you, I know the feeling, Shizu. Shizu smiled bitterly. And I hated him for it. I hated him, until I saw him again years later. He looked so calm. So at peace. I wondered if I had just been a stepping stone. Madara said nothing. He simply listened, as he always did when the wounds were too deep to heal with jutsu. I've tried to keep smiling for the children. I wore the mask for them. A protector. A hero. Her gaze turned back to him. But now, I just want peace. You want to die. I want to be free. A long pause. Madara closed his eyes and nodded. I'll grant that, but I will not forget. She looked at him with soft gratitude. Madara, please. If you ever find Leon, ask him why. Just ask him why. Madara's expression turned hard as stone. I'll do more than that. He reached out and gently grasped her hand. You have my word, Shizu. I'll find him. And I'll drag the truth from him whether he wants to give it or not. She let out a small laugh, soft, genuine. Thank you. Her hand fell limp. Her eyes closed. Silence returned. The sun had begun to set over the Jura forest, casting golden beams through the trees as smoke gently rose from the ceremonial pyre. The funeral had been a somber affair, simple, dignified, and heartfelt. Shizu's body had been cremated atop a wooden altar constructed by Madara himself, the flames fueled not by chakra or magicules, but natural fire. A rare humility from a man who could conjure gods and titans. The goblins mourned her passing with silent reverence. The direwolves bowed their heads. The dwarves stood at attention. Even Rango whimpered softly, his tail still and low to the ground. Kaijin removed his cap in silent respect. Madara had not spoken a word during the ceremony. He merely stood, arms folded, eyes locked on the dancing flame until the last ember dimmed, watchful, impassive, and unreadable. Now, several hours later, Ellen, Cabal, and Guido made their way through the tree-lined path leading out of the village. Their supplies were packed, and their horses borrowed from a nearby trade convoy were prepped for the long return to Bloomond. They walked in contemplative silence, still shaken. Guido was the first to speak. I never thought I'd attend a monster's funeral. Let alone for a woman like her. She wasn't a monster, Ellen said softly, brushing a lock of blonde hair from her eyes. She was kind, strong, and tragic. She died with dignity, Cabal said, adjusting his sword on his back. But it's him I keep thinking about. They all knew who he meant. Ellen nodded slowly. Madara. I've never felt anything like that, Guido added. Not from a monster, not from a person. When he looked at me, I felt like I could vanish from existence if he willed it. Cabal frowned. He didn't even seem to care about showing off. That's what scares me most. All that power and he uses it like it's second nature. No effort. No pride. Just terrifying calm. Ellen glanced behind them, at the village shrinking in the distance. They respect him, she said. Not out of fear, but genuine loyalty. The goblins, the wolves, the dwarves, even the forest itself seems to keep its distance. Cabal nodded. When we give our report, we have to be careful. This isn't a typical monster settlement. What should we say? Guido asked. We can't lie to the guild. We won't, Cabal replied. We'll tell them the truth. That the village is peaceful for now. That they respect human life and follow a single leader. A man, Ellen added, whose presence is so overwhelming it warps the very aura of the forest. A shinobi who built a village in a matter of hours. A warrior who defeated an elemental like Ifrit without breaking a sweat. Guido chuckled nervously. Think they'll believe us? No, Cabal said. But they'll have to. Because this isn't the last time the world's going to hear the name Madara Uchiha. As the trio rode into the darkening woods, heading back toward human lands and political entanglements, the village behind them lit with a soft glow. Preparations for night underway, new homes being built, and whispers already growing of a sovereign lord unlike any Jura had ever known. And in the forest heart, Madara stood alone at the now cold pyre, eyes closed, the memory of fire and loss etched silently into his soul.